They called it justice. But when the cowboy's daughters whispered those three words, everything the town believed shattered in an instant. In the scorching heat of a frontier square, a bleeding woman stood condemned for murder, her fate sealed before the trial even began. The sheriff's offer was simple. Any man could claim her, own her, decide her future. Most walked past without a second glance, but when Caleb Ward's twin daughters saw her face, they grabbed their father's hands and whispered words that would change everything. "Papa, that's her." Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The sun beat down mercilessly on Redemption Creek, turning the wooden buildings into furnaces and the dirt streets into rivers of dust. It was the kind of heat that made men angry and judgment swift, the kind of heat that made cruelty feel justified. Caleb Ward wasn't supposed to be there that day. He'd ridden into town with one purpose: buy winter supplies, get his daughters their school books, and ride back to the ranch before sunset. Simple, clean, no complications. That's how Caleb preferred life these days. Predictable, controlled, safe. Ever since Margaret died 3 years ago, safety had become his religion. But his daughters, 9-year-old twins Sarah and Emma, had other plans. "Papa, stop," Sarah said suddenly, her small hand gripping the wagon's edge so hard her knuckles went white. Caleb pulled the reins gently, bringing the horse to a halt at the edge of the town square. "What is it, sweetheart?" Emma stood up in the wagon bed, her identical face wearing the same expression of horror her sister wore. "Papa, what are they doing?" That's when Caleb heard it, the murmur of a crowd, the ugly sound of people gathering to watch something terrible. His jaw tightened. Public spectacles in Redemption Creek usually meant one thing. Sheriff Wade Garrett was making an example of someone. "Girls, stay in the wagon," Caleb said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they wouldn't listen. These daughters of his had inherited their mother's stubborn streak, along with her dark eyes and fierce heart. The crowd had formed a loose circle in the center of the square, maybe 60 or 70 people deep. Farmers who should have been in their fields, shopkeepers who'd abandoned their counters. Even the preacher stood there, arms crossed, watching with the same hungry curiosity as everyone else. Caleb's gut told him to turn around, load the girls back in the wagon, and leave. Whatever was happening here wasn't his business, and he'd learned long ago that getting involved in Sheriff Garrett's affairs was like stepping into quicksand. The more you struggled, the deeper you sank. But Sarah had already climbed down from the wagon. "Sarah, I said stay. I need to see Papa." Her voice carried that particular tone that reminded him so much of Margaret. It made his chest ache. Determination mixed with compassion, like she knew something important was happening and couldn't look away even if she wanted to. Emma followed her sister, and Caleb found himself doing what he always did, following his daughters, because the alternative was letting them go alone into God knows what. The crowd parted grudgingly as Caleb moved through it, his daughters flanking him on either side. He stood 6'3", broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, and people generally moved when Caleb Ward needed them to. Not out of fear, he wasn't that kind of man, but out of respect. He kept to himself, paid his debts, raised his girls right, and didn't cause trouble. In a town like Redemption Creek, that counted for something. What he saw when he reached the front of the crowd made his blood run cold. 3 women stood tied to wooden posts that had been driven into the ground in the center of the square. They weren't just tied. They were displayed. Bound at the wrists and ankles, barely able to stand, their faces bearing the unmistakable marks of violence. Bruises bloomed purple and yellow across their skin, split lips, torn clothing. One woman, elderly with gray hair matted with blood, could barely hold her head up. Another, younger, stared at the ground with the empty eyes of someone whose spirit had already fled. But it was the third woman who made Sarah gasp, and Emma grab her father's hand so tight it hurt. She was maybe 30, with long dark hair that had been beautiful before someone had used it to drag her through the dirt. Her dress, once a simple blue cotton, was torn at the shoulder, revealing bruises that made Caleb's hands clench into fists. Blood trickled from a cut above her left eye, but she wasn't looking at the ground like the others. She was staring straight ahead, chin raised, eyes defiant despite the pain written across her features. There was something almost regal about her bearing, like she'd decided that if they were going to break her, she'd make them work for every inch. Sheriff Wade Garrett stood on a wooden platform someone had hastily constructed, probably for this exact purpose. He was a big man, running to fat now in his middle age, with a thick mustache and eyes that had long ago lost any hint of kindness. He wore his badge like a crown and his authority like a weapon. "Gentlemen of Redemption Creek," Garrett's voice boomed across the square, silencing the murmurs. "We're here today to dispense justice and solve problems all at once. These three women," he gestured toward the post like he was showing off livestock, "have been found guilty of various crimes against this community." "Guilty?" someone in the crowd shouted. "There wasn't no trial." "Justice don't always need a courtroom, Amos," Garrett shot back, his voice carrying a warning. "Sometimes the evidence speaks for itself. The old woman there, Martha Keene, been practicing witchcraft, cursing crops and cattle. Young Abigail," he pointed to the empty-eyed girl, "killed her own baby, drowned it in the creek." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Caleb saw Abigail flinch at the accusation, tears streaming down her face, but she said nothing. She was too far gone to defend herself. "And this one," Garrett continued, his voice taking on a particularly ugly edge as he pointed to the dark-haired woman, "is Elena Cross. Murdered her own husband in cold blood while he slept. Stabbed him 17 times. We found her standing over the body, covered in his blood, knife still in her hand." The crowd's reaction was immediate. Anger, disgust, calls for immediate hanging. But Caleb noticed something the others didn't. Elena Cross hadn't flinched at the accusation, hadn't looked away or started crying or begging for mercy. Instead, her jaw had tightened and her eyes had found the sheriff's face with an expression that could have melted steel. "That's a lie," she said, her voice cutting through the crowd noise like a blade. It wasn't loud, but something in its quality made people go quiet. "You know it's a lie, Wade." The use of his first name made Garrett's face flush red. "You'll address me as sheriff, murderer." "I'll address you as what you are," Elena said, and despite her bindings, despite the blood and bruises, there was nothing defeated about her. "A liar, a coward, and the man who actually killed my husband." The crowd exploded in noise. Garrett let them shout and jeer at her for a moment before raising his hands for silence. "You see? Delusional, desperate. She'll say anything to escape justice." He turned back to the crowd, his showman's smile returning. "Now, we could hang these women. That's certainly what some of you are calling for, but I got a better idea. A more practical solution." Caleb felt his stomach turn. He knew that tone, knew that smile. Nothing good ever followed when Wade Garrett thought he was being clever. "These women need husbands," Garrett announced. "Someone to keep them in line, reform them, make them useful members of society instead of burdens on it. So here's what I'm offering. Any unmarried man in this town can claim one of these women. Take her home and make her your wife. She'll work your land, tend your house, bear your children, all legal and proper." "And if she murders us in our sleep?" someone shouted. Garrett grinned. "That's your problem to solve, friend. But I suspect a firm hand and clear expectations will solve most behavioral issues." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Course, if nobody claims them by sundown, we hang them, all three. Problem solved either way." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some men looked interested, eyeing the women like they were horses at auction. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. The women in the crowd stood silent, their faces carefully blank. In Redemption Creek, women didn't question Sheriff Garrett's decisions, not if they were smart. Caleb felt sick. This wasn't justice. It wasn't even law. It was slavery dressed up in legal language, and everyone here knew it. But speaking up against Wade Garrett meant making an enemy of the most powerful man in 3 counties. It meant risking your livelihood, your safety, maybe your life. He started to turn away, to get his daughters out of there before they saw anything worse. That's when Sarah's hand tightened on his. "Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Papa, look at her face. Sarah, we need to go. Papa, look." Something in his daughter's voice made him stop, made him turn back to Elena Cross, really look at her for the first time. And that's when Emma grabbed his other hand and whispered the words that would change everything. "Papa, that's her." Caleb's heart stopped. He looked at his daughters, both of them staring at Elena with absolute certainty, then back at the bound woman. Really looked this time, past the blood and bruises, past the torn dress and matted hair. And suddenly, impossibly, he saw her. Not here, not now, but 16 months ago, in the middle of the worst blizzard to hit these mountains in living memory. Caleb had been stupid, reckless. He'd seen the storm coming, but had convinced himself he could make it home before it hit. He'd been wrong. By the time he realized how wrong, they were miles from the ranch with snow falling so thick he couldn't see the horse's head in front of him. The girls had been 7 then, smaller, more fragile. When the wagon wheel broke and they had to abandon it, he'd wrapped them in every blanket he had and tried to find shelter. But the storm had erased the world, turned everything into swirling white nothing. He'd been preparing to die, to hold his daughters close and hope it would be quick, when the cabin appeared like a miracle through the snow. It wasn't much, barely more than a shack, but it had walls and a roof and a door he could push open. He'd carried the girls inside, one under each arm, and that's when he'd found her. A woman, alone, half frozen herself, trying to keep a pathetic fire going with wood that was too wet to burn properly. She'd looked up when they crashed through the door, and for just a moment Caleb had seen fear in her eyes. Fear of him, of what a strange man appearing in her shelter might mean. But then she'd seen the girls, barely conscious in his arms, and everything else had disappeared. "Inside, quickly," she'd said, her voice urgent but calm. "Get them by the fire. I have blankets." She'd moved like someone who knew what needed to be done. No hesitation, no panic. She'd stripped the wet clothes off the girls with practiced efficiency, wrapped them in her own blankets, the only dry ones she had, and held them against her body to share warmth. Caleb had tried to help, but she'd waved him off. "Get more wood. There's a lean-to on the back wall. Whatever you can find that's not soaked through." He'd spent the next 2 hours gathering wood, breaking apart furniture from the cabin, anything that would burn. The woman, she'd never told him her name, had stayed with Sarah and Emma the entire time, talking to them in a low, soothing voice, telling them stories about summer days and warm sunshine and adventures that would come when the snow melted. By the time the storm broke, the girls' color had returned. They were sleeping peacefully, wrapped in blankets that smelled like lavender and pine. Caleb had tried to thank the woman, to offer her money, to ask her name so he could repay her kindness somehow. But she'd just shaken her head. "You don't owe me anything," she'd said, and there had been something sad in her smile. "Just take care of them. Love them the way I can see you do. That's payment enough." "At least tell me your name," Caleb had said. She'd hesitated, then simply said, "Just call me a friend." By the time he'd loaded the girls onto his horse and turned back to thank her one more time, she was gone. The cabin door stood open, the fire dying, and no trace remained that she'd ever been there except the blanket still wrapped around his daughters. He'd searched for that cabin a dozen times over the following months, trying to find it again so he could return the blankets and properly thank the woman who'd saved his daughters' lives. But it was like it had never existed. The landscape had swallowed it whole. Eventually, he'd convinced himself he'd imagined parts of it, that the cold and fear had made his memories unreliable, that maybe the cabin had been there all along and the woman was just a trapper's wife passing through. But the girls had never forgotten her face. "That's her, Papa," Sarah said again, more urgently now. "The woman from the storm, the one who saved us." Emma was nodding frantically. "She gave us her blankets. She told us stories about the summer meadows, remember? She sang that song about the mockingbird." Caleb's mind was racing. It couldn't be the same woman. What were the odds? In a territory this size, that the stranger who'd saved his daughters would end up here, accused of murder, tied to a post in the town square. But his daughters were certain, and they'd never lied to him about anything important. He looked at Elena Cross again. Now that he knew what to look for, he could see it, the shape of her face, the way she held herself, even in the worst circumstances. The same quiet strength that had kept his daughters alive through that terrible night. "Papa, we can't let them hurt her," Sarah whispered. "She saved us. We have to save her." "Girls, you don't understand. We understand that she's good," Emma interrupted, her voice fierce despite her fear. "We understand that she helped us when she didn't have to, when she didn't even know us. We understand that Mama would want us to help her." That last part hit Caleb like a physical blow. Margaret would have wanted them to help. His wife had believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. It was one of the things he'd loved most about her. And she would have been furious at this spectacle, at these women being treated like property. On the platform, Sheriff Garrett was continuing his auction. "Come now, gentlemen, don't be shy. These women might be criminals, but they're still capable of bearing children, cooking meals, warming beds. Surely someone here needs a wife?" A few men stepped forward, eyeing the women with varying degrees of interest and disgust. Caleb recognized them, drifters mostly, men with no land and fewer prospects, the kind of men who saw this as an opportunity to get something for nothing. "I'll take the young one," a man called out. Bill Tucker, a farmer whose previous 2 wives had both died under mysterious circumstances, "Could use someone to help with the planting." "Excellent," Garrett beamed. "Anyone else?" Another man claimed the old woman, Martha Keene, probably planning to work her to death in his fields before the season was out, but nobody stepped forward for Elena Cross. "No takers for our murderess?" Garrett asked, his smile turning cruel. "Can't say I blame you. Woman who'd kill her own husband might kill anyone. Guess that leaves the rope for this one." He gestured, and 2 of his deputies moved toward Elena with a length of rope. Not to untie her, to hang her. Elena finally showed fear then. Not for herself, Caleb realized, but something deeper. He saw her jaw clench, saw her take one last look at the sky like she was memorizing the color of freedom before it disappeared forever. Caleb felt his daughter's hands tighten on his. Everything in him screamed that this was a mistake, that getting involved with Wade Garrett's business was dangerous, that he had daughters to think about, a ranch to protect, a life to preserve. But he also had a debt. And he had Margaret's voice in his head, asking what kind of man he wanted to be, what kind of father, what kind of example he wanted to set for his girls. Before he could talk himself out of it, Caleb Ward stepped forward. "Wait." The word came out rougher than he intended, but it cut through the crowd noise like a gunshot. Every head turned toward him. Sheriff Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Something to say, Ward?" Caleb swallowed hard. This was it. The moment he could still back out, apologize, claim he'd spoken without thinking, go back to his safe, quiet life and pretend this never happened. Instead, he heard himself say, "I'll take her." The crowd exploded in shocked murmurs. Sheriff Garrett's face went through several emotions, surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been anger before he hid it behind his public smile. "You'll take Elena Cross?" Garrett asked, his voice carefully neutral. "The woman accused of murdering her husband? You understand what you're claiming here, Ward. I understand that you're offering these women as wives to avoid the expense and controversy of a trial," Caleb said, keeping his voice steady despite the way his heart was hammering. "I'm accepting your offer for Elena Cross." "Papa's right," Sarah said loudly, stepping forward to stand beside her father. Emma immediately joined her. The 2 girls looked impossibly small in front of the crowd, but they held their ground with a courage that made Caleb's throat tight. "Our papa is a good man," Emma announced to anyone listening, "and he keeps his promises. If he says he'll take care of her, he will." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Some people looked approving. Caleb Ward was known as a decent man, after all, and his daughters were sweet girls. Others looked skeptical or outright hostile, and Wade Garrett looked like he'd just swallowed something that disagreed with him. "Your daughters are sweet, Ward, but they don't understand what you're taking into your home," Garrett said, his voice carrying a warning. "This woman is dangerous, unstable. She killed a man in cold blood." "Then I'll take that risk," Caleb replied. "You offered these women as wives. I'm claiming one. That's your law, Sheriff. You going to honor it or not?" It was a trap, and Garrett knew it. If he refused now, he'd look like a hypocrite in front of the whole town. But if he agreed, he was letting Elena Cross slip through his fingers, and Caleb could see in the sheriff's eyes that Elena was the one he'd really wanted to see hang. The silence stretched out, tense and dangerous. Finally, Garrett smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course I'll honor it. A man's word is his bond." He gestured to his deputies. "Cut her down and give her to Mr. Ward. Let's see how long he lasts before he brings her back begging us to hang her after all." The crowd laughed, the tension breaking slightly. But Caleb kept his eyes on Elena as the deputies approached her. For the first time since he'd seen her, Elena Cross looked directly at him. Her dark eyes were wary, confused, searching his face for some hint of what kind of man was claiming her now. He could see her trying to place him, trying to figure out if she'd seen him before. She didn't remember. The cabin, the storm, his daughters. It had been one night 16 months ago, and she'd been half frozen herself. She'd probably helped dozens of people since then. Why would she remember them? The ropes fell away and Elena stumbled. The deputies caught her roughly, but she straightened immediately, refusing to show weakness, even though Caleb could see she could barely stand. "Take her, Ward," Garrett said, his voice dripping with false cheer. "She's all yours. May you have better luck with her than her last husband." More laughter from the crowd. Caleb ignored it and stepped forward, meeting Elena's eyes. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Elena studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once, sharp and controlled. "Then come with me," Caleb said. "You and your new daughters." He saw surprise flicker across her face at that, understanding that the two girls standing protectively behind him weren't just observers, they were part of this. That whatever this strange situation was, it involved all four of them. Sarah and Emma each took one of Elena's hands, supporting her weight without being obvious about it. The gesture was so natural, so kind, that Caleb saw Elena's composure crack just slightly. Her eyes filled with tears, she blinked away furiously. "Come on," Sarah whispered. "We'll take care of you." Papa promised. They walked through the crowd like that. A widower rancher, his twin daughters, and a woman accused of murder. People moved aside, some with respect, others with barely concealed hostility. Caleb heard the whispers starting already, the speculation about what kind of man would claim a killer, what he planned to do with her, how long before she murdered him too. Let them talk. He'd stopped caring what most of these people thought years ago. They reached the wagon, and Caleb helped Elena climb into the back. She moved like someone whose body had been pushed past its limits. But she did it without complaint, without asking for help beyond what was offered. The girls climbed up beside her, immediately positioning themselves like small guards. Sarah pulled out a water canteen and offered it to Elena. Emma found a clean cloth and started trying to clean the blood from Elena's face with the careful concentration of a child who'd watched adults tend wounds. Caleb took the driver's seat and picked up the reins, ready to leave this cursed town behind. "Ward!" Sheriff Garrett's voice stopped him. The sheriff had climbed down from his platform and was walking toward the wagon, his deputies flanking him like an honor guard. "A word before you go?" It wasn't really a question. Caleb climbed down, positioning himself between Garrett and the wagon, between the sheriff and his daughters, between the law and the woman he'd just claimed. "Make it quick," Caleb said. "I need to get home before dark." Garrett smiled that cold smile again. "Just wanted to make sure you understood the situation, Ward. This woman isn't just accused of murder. She's guilty. We found her with the body, covered in blood. She confessed." "Then why the spectacle?" Caleb asked quietly. "Why not just hang her?" Something flickered in Garrett's eyes. Anger, maybe fear. "Justice has its processes." This wasn't justice. It was cruelty dressed up as entertainment. The words were out before Caleb could stop them. He saw Garrett's face flush red, saw the deputies' hands move toward their guns, but Garrett held up a hand, stopping them. "Careful, Ward. You're taking a dangerous criminal into your home, around your precious daughters. If anything happens, if she hurts them, if she runs, if she so much as looks at you wrong, you bring her back to me, immediately. You understand?" "I understand that she's my responsibility now," Caleb said, "according to your law, which means what happens on my ranch is my business, not yours." "Everything in this county is my business," Garrett said softly, and there was real menace in his voice now. "Don't forget that, Ward. I've been generous with you and your girls since Margaret passed. Let you keep your land, didn't hassle you about taxes, looked the other way when you missed that payment to the bank. I'd hate for that generosity to end." There it was, the thread underneath the friendliness, the reminder of who really held power in Redemption Creek. Caleb met Garrett's eyes and made a decision. "Thank you for the reminder, Sheriff. I'll keep it in mind." He climbed back onto the wagon before Garrett could say anything else, snapped the reins, and started moving. He didn't look back. Behind him, he heard Sarah whisper to Elena, "Don't be scared. Papa's really good. He's not like the sheriff. He won't hurt you." And Elena's voice, rough from crying or screaming or both. I can see that, little one. I can see that. The ride back to the ranch took 2 hours, and Caleb spent every minute second-guessing his decision. What had he done? Brought home a woman accused of murder, put his daughters in potential danger, made an enemy of the most powerful man in the territory. All because his daughters claimed she'd helped them once during a snowstorm? He was insane, reckless, exactly the kind of stupid his father had always warned him about. But every time he glanced back at the wagon bed, he saw his daughters sitting on either side of Elena, talking to her in low voices, and something in his chest eased. Sarah and Emma were good judges of character. If they trusted this woman, maybe he should too. Elena herself hadn't said much. She'd drunk the water Sarah offered, let Emma clean her wounds, and wrapped herself in the blanket the girls insisted she take. But her eyes never stopped moving, watching the landscape, tracking every sound, staying alert for danger even in her exhausted state. She was scared, Caleb realized. Not of him exactly, but of what came next. Of being claimed by a strange man and taken to an isolated ranch with no way to defend herself if he turned out to be as bad as whoever had given her those bruises. "We're almost home," he called back to them as the ranch came into view. "There's a guest room that was my wife's. You can stay there." Elena's head snapped up. "Your wife?" "She passed 3 years ago," Caleb said simply. "Cancer. It was quick, but not quick enough." "I'm sorry," Elena said, and something in her voice made him believe she meant it. "So am I." The ranch wasn't much, a main house, a barn, a few outbuildings, corrals for the horses and cattle. But it was home, and it was paid for, and it was the one place in the world where Caleb felt like he had some control over his life. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and helped Elena down. She stumbled slightly, her legs not quite ready to support her weight after sitting so long, and Caleb caught her elbow to steady her. She flinched at the touch, just slightly, but he felt it. Felt the way her body tensed, preparing for violence. "Easy," he said softly, releasing her immediately. "You're safe here. I promise." Elena looked at him with those dark, wary eyes. Men make lots of promises. "I know, but I keep mine." "Papa does," Emma confirmed, appearing at his side. "He promised Mama he'd take care of us, and he does, every single day." "He promised he'd teach us to ride, and he did," Sarah added. "He promised we'd have the best birthday cake in the territory, and we did. He promised—" "Girls," Caleb interrupted gently, "let's get Elena inside. She needs rest and proper medical attention." The house was clean but spare. Caleb had never been much for decoration, and the girls were too young to care about such things. But it was warm and dry and infinitely better than being tied to a post in the town square. "The guest room is upstairs, second door on the right," Caleb said. "There's a bed, a dresser, a wash basin. I'll bring up some of Margaret's old clothes. You're about the same size." Elena hesitated at the base of the stairs, like she wasn't sure this was real, like she was waiting for the trap to spring. "I'll bring up some hot water too," Caleb continued. "And some food. When's the last time you ate?" I don't remember," Elena admitted. "Then I'll make enough for an army. Girls, help Elena get settled. I'll be up in a few minutes." He left before Elena could protest, heading to the kitchen to put together something resembling a meal. His mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened, trying to figure out what came next. He had a woman accused of murder living under his roof. A woman the sheriff clearly had some personal grudge against. A woman his daughters trusted completely, but who he knew almost nothing about. What had he done? Upstairs, he heard Sarah and Emma chattering away, explaining where everything was, making Elena feel welcome with the easy grace of children who didn't understand how complicated the world could be. Caleb put water on to boil and started slicing bread. His hands moved automatically while his thoughts churned. The way Garrett had looked at Elena, the threat in his voice when he'd warned Caleb to bring her back if anything went wrong, the way he'd called her guilty without a trial, without witnesses, without anything resembling real justice. Something about this whole situation stank. And now Caleb was right in the middle of it, whether he wanted to be or not. He was carrying a tray upstairs, food, hot water, bandages, and some of Margaret's old clothes when he heard Elena's voice through the door. "Why?" she was asking, her voice rough with emotion. "Why did you tell your father to choose me? You don't know me. I could be everything that Sheriff said. I could be dangerous. Because you saved us, Sarah said simply. In the snow, remember? We were freezing and Papa couldn't find shelter, and then there was your cabin and you gave us your blankets, even though you were cold too. Caleb heard Elena's sharp intake of breath. That was you? The girls from the storm? We knew it was you the second we saw your face, Emma said proudly. We remembered. We always remember important people. But I didn't. Elena's voice broke. I didn't do anything special. I just helped. Anyone would have helped. No, Sarah said firmly. Not anyone. Lots of people would have turned us away, would have been scared of Papa or wanted something in return. But you just helped because it was right, because we needed it. There was a long silence. Then Caleb heard something that made his heart clench, the sound of Elena Cross finally crying. Not the silent tears she'd blinked away in the town square, but real sobs, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. I'm sorry, she gasped between sobs. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. It's okay to cry, Emma said, and Caleb could hear the sound of small arms wrapping around a grown woman. Mama used to say crying is just how your heart cleans itself out when it gets too full of hurt. Caleb stood outside the door for a long moment, tray in hands, listening to the stranger cry in his dead wife's room while his daughters comforted her with Margaret's own words. Then he knocked softly and pushed the door open. Elena was sitting on the edge of the bed, Sarah and Emma on either side of her, all three of them looking like they'd been through a war, which Caleb supposed they had. I brought food and water, he said quietly, and some clothes. The girls can help you get cleaned up if you'd like, or I can call Doc Morrison to come check those injuries. Elena wiped her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself. No doctor. Please. I can't. Can't or won't? She met his eyes. Does it matter? Caleb set the tray down on the dresser. I suppose not. But those wounds need tending. Some of them look infected. I can do it myself. I'm sure you can, but you don't have to. They stared at each other for a long moment, this strange dance of trust and wariness, both of them trying to figure out who the other person really was. Finally, Elena looked away first. Thank you. For the clothes and the food, and for claiming me. I know you didn't have to do that. Actually, I think I did, Caleb said. He glanced at his daughters, who were watching him with those intense dark eyes they'd inherited from their mother. These two have strong opinions about right and wrong, and they're usually right. We're always right, Sarah corrected. Humble too, Caleb added with a small smile. I'll leave you to get settled. Come down when you're ready. Or don't. There's no rush. This is your home now, such as it is. He started to leave, then paused at the door. Elena, one thing. I need to know if you're planning to run, because if you are, you should do it tonight. Before Garrett starts watching the ranch. Before it gets complicated. Elena looked at him, surprised. You'd let me go? I claimed you to save your life, not to own you. You're free to leave whenever you want. But if you stay, if you choose to stay, then we need to figure this out together. What happens next? What the truth actually is. Because I don't believe you murdered your husband, not the way Garrett described it. What makes you so sure? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb looked at his daughters again, then back at Elena. Because the woman who saved my daughters wouldn't kill a man in his sleep. She'd fight him face to face if she had to, but she wouldn't murder him. I don't know what really happened, but I know it wasn't what Garrett said. Elena's eyes filled with tears again. How can you know that? You don't know me. Maybe not, but my daughters do. And I trust them more than I trust Wade Garrett. He nodded toward the window. So stay or go. Your choice. But make it soon. Because once the sun comes up tomorrow, choosing gets a lot more complicated. He left then, closing the door quietly behind him, and herded his daughters downstairs to give Elena privacy. In the kitchen, Sarah and Emma sat at the table, swinging their legs and looking very pleased with themselves. That was good, Papa, Sarah said. What you said to her about trusting us. Well, it's true, Caleb said, starting to prepare a proper dinner. You two have good instincts about people. We learned from Mama, Emma said. She always said to trust your heart about people, not your head. Your head can be tricked, but your heart knows. Caleb smiled despite the ache in his chest that always came when the girls talked about Margaret. Your mama was a smart woman. Are you scared, Papa? Sarah asked suddenly. About Elena staying here? Caleb considered lying, saying everything would be fine, keeping them sheltered from the complicated truth. But Margaret had always been honest with them, and he'd tried to follow her example. A little, he admitted. I don't know what we've gotten ourselves into, but sometimes doing the right thing is scary. That's what makes it worth doing. Elena's scared too, Emma observed. We could hear it in her voice. She doesn't trust you yet. Can you blame her? She doesn't know me. For all she knows, I'm as bad as whoever hurt her. But she'll learn, Sarah said confidently. Just like we learned that you're the best papa in the whole world. She'll see it too. You just have to be patient. Caleb looked at his daughters, these wise, kind, impossibly brave little souls, and felt his heart swell with love and fear in equal measure. When did you two get so smart? He asked. They looked at each other and grinned. We were born this way, they said in unison, then dissolved into giggles. Upstairs in Margaret's old room, Elena Cross sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. This morning, she'd been waiting to die. Tonight, she was in a stranger's house, wearing a dead woman's nightgown, with 2 little girls who insisted she was a hero and a father who'd risked everything to save her. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. She looked at her hands, clean now, the blood finally washed away, and tried to remember when her life had become this nightmare. When had the man she'd married turned into a monster? When had Wade Garrett decided she was easier to destroy than to let go? When had the world become a place where women were tied to posts and auctioned like cattle? And when, in all that darkness, had 2 little girls remembered her face from one night 16 months ago and convinced their father to step into the fire to save her? Elena pulled the blanket around her shoulders, soft, clean, smelling like sunshine and lavender, and made a decision. She wouldn't run. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was somewhere safe. Somewhere the walls didn't close in. Somewhere a man's footsteps didn't make her heart race with fear. Somewhere that felt, impossibly, like it might become home. If she was brave enough to let it. If she could trust that Caleb Ward really was the man his daughters believed him to be. If she could survive whatever Wade Garrett was planning, because she knew with absolute certainty, that the sheriff wasn't going to let this go. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight, Elena Cross was alive. Clean, fed, safe. And tomorrow, she would start figuring out how to stay that way. Morning came too early, announced by roosters and the soft sounds of his daughters moving around downstairs. Caleb had barely slept, his mind churning through everything that could go wrong, everything he'd set in motion by stepping forward in that town square. He dressed quietly and headed downstairs, half expecting to find Elena gone, the window open. Nothing but an empty room and the ghost of a woman he'd tried to save. But when he reached the kitchen, he found Sarah and Emma already at the table, whispering to each other with the conspiratorial intensity that usually meant they were planning something. "Morning, girls," he said, heading to the stove to start coffee. "You're up early." "We wanted to make breakfast for Elena," Sarah announced, "but we weren't sure what she likes." "So we're making everything," Emma added proudly. Caleb looked at the counter and had to suppress a smile. They'd laid out eggs, bacon, bread, jam, butter, and what looked like an attempt at pancake batter that had gone somewhat sideways. "That's very thoughtful," he said carefully. "But maybe let me help with the actual cooking part?" "We're not babies, Papa," Sarah protested. "We can cook." "I know you can. I just don't want you burning down the house before Elena wakes up. Seems like that would make a bad impression." The girls giggled, and Caleb felt some of the tension in his chest ease. Whatever happened next, at least his daughters were happy. That counted for something. He was flipping bacon when he heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, careful, like someone who wasn't sure of their welcome. He turned to see Elena standing in the doorway, wearing one of Margaret's old dresses, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid. The bruises on her face looked worse in the morning light, purple and yellow blooming across her cheekbone, but her eyes were clear and alert. "Good morning," Caleb said, keeping his voice neutral, unthreatening. "Coffee?" Elena nodded, moving into the kitchen like she was navigating a minefield. "Thank you." "Did you sleep?" he asked, pouring her a cup. "Some." She accepted the coffee with hands that trembled slightly. "More than I expected to." "We're making you breakfast," Emma announced, abandoning her post at the table to hover near Elena. "Everything we could think of because we don't know what you like yet." That's very kind," Elena said, and Caleb heard the catch in her voice, like kindness was something she'd forgotten how to accept. They ate together at the small kitchen table, awkward at first, nobody quite sure what to say. But the girls filled the silence with chatter about the ranch, about their lessons, about the new foal in the barn that needed a name. Normal things, safe things, and slowly, Caleb watched Elena begin to relax, her shoulders dropping from their defensive hunch, her breathing evening out. "This is good," she said quietly, gesturing to the food. "Really good. I haven't had a meal like this in a long time." "How long?" Caleb asked before he could stop himself. Elena's hand tightened on her fork. "Long enough that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like." Sarah and Emma exchanged glances. Then Sarah asked the question Caleb had been wondering all night. "Miss Elena, what really happened? Why did the sheriff say you killed your husband?" "Sarah," Caleb warned, "that's not—" "It's all right," Elena interrupted, setting down her fork. She looked at the girls, then at Caleb, her expression carefully controlled. "You deserve to know what you've brought into your home, what trouble you might be in for helping me." She took a breath, gathering herself, and Caleb saw her hands ball into fists under the table. "My husband's name was Thomas Cross. We met 4 years ago in Silver Springs, before I came to this territory. He seemed normal, kind even, attentive. Everything a woman is supposed to want." Her voice took on a bitter edge. "Turned out I was terrible at reading people." Caleb said nothing, just waited. The girls had gone quiet, sensing this was important. "The first time he hit me was 3 months after we married. He apologized, cried, swore it would never happen again. The second time was a month later. The third time was a week after that." Elena's voice stayed flat, emotionless, like she was talking about someone else's life. "By the end of the first year, I stopped counting." Sarah's hand crept across the table to touch Elena's arm. The woman looked down at it, surprised, then gently squeezed the small fingers. "I tried to leave twice. The first time Thomas found me and brought me back. Said if I ever tried again, he'd kill me and make it look like an accident. The second time," she paused, swallowing hard. "The second time, Wade Garrett found me instead." Caleb felt his blood run cold. "Garrett knew?" "Garrett knew everything," Elena said, meeting his eyes. "Thomas worked for him sometimes, running errands, delivering messages. I don't know what exactly, but it was enough that Garrett protected him. When I went to the sheriff for help, Garrett laughed. Said a man had a right to discipline his wife. That if I couldn't handle being married, maybe I wasn't fit to be part of civilized society." "That's horrible," Emma whispered. "It gets worse," Elena said. "About 6 months ago, Thomas started gambling. Heavy gambling. Lost money we didn't have, made debts he couldn't pay. He got desperate. And desperate men make stupid choices." She stood up, moving to the window like she needed distance from the memory. 3 weeks ago, Thomas came home drunk and angry. Said he'd found a solution to all our problems. That Garrett had made him an offer, if Thomas could convince me to cooperate with the sheriff's advances, Garrett would forgive all his debts. Caleb's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. Beside him, Sarah made a small, distressed sound. "I refused, obviously. That night, Thomas beat me worse than he ever had before. Told me I didn't have a choice. That Garrett always got what he wanted, one way or another." Elena's reflection in the window showed no emotion, but Caleb could see her hands shaking. "The next day, Garrett came to our house himself. Thomas was out, probably drinking away what little money we had left. The sheriff made his intentions very clear, said I could come willingly and make things easy for everyone. Or he could make my life very difficult." "What did you do?" Caleb asked quietly. "I told him to go to hell." A ghost of a smile crossed Elena's face. Not my wisest moment, but it felt good. For about 5 seconds. She turned from the window, her expression hardening. That night, I packed what little I had and decided to run. For real this time. I didn't care where, just away. But when I got home to get my things, I found Thomas in our bedroom. Dead. Stabbed multiple times, just like Garrett said, and Wade Garrett standing over the body with a bloody knife in his hand. The kitchen went silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. He killed your husband, Caleb said slowly, and framed you for it. He didn't even try to hide it, Elena said, her voice taking on a hollow quality. Just looked at me and smiled, said this was what happened to women who didn't know their place, that he'd given me a chance to do this the easy way, but I'd chosen hard, so now I'd hang for murder, and nobody would question it because everyone knew Thomas and I fought. But you didn't confess, Caleb said, remembering what Garrett had claimed in the town square. He said you confessed. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. He had 3 deputies swear they heard me confess. My word against 4 lawmen. Who do you think people believed? Sarah was crying quietly, and Emma looked like she might be sick. Caleb felt a rage building in his chest that he hadn't experienced since Margaret died, the helpless, burning fury of watching someone suffer and being unable to stop it. Why didn't he just hang you immediately? Caleb asked. Why the spectacle in the square? Because Wade Garrett is a showman, Elena said bitterly, and because hanging me outright might raise questions. But if I chose to become someone's wife instead, and then maybe had an accident a few months down the road, well, that's just tragedy. Nobody investigates tragedy when the sheriff says not to. He expected someone else to claim you, Caleb realized. Someone he controlled. Someone who would do what he wanted. Probably. I don't know who. I was so sure I was going to die yesterday that I stopped paying attention to the details. Elena moved back to the table, sinking into her chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. And then you stepped forward, you and your daughters, and I still don't understand why. We told you why, Sarah said fiercely, wiping her eyes. Because you saved us. Because it was right. Nothing about this situation is right, Elena said gently. You've put yourself in danger for a stranger. Garrett won't let this go. He'll find a way to make you regret helping me. Let him try, Caleb said, and he meant it. The fear he'd felt last night had burned away, replaced by something clearer and harder. This woman had been terrorized, abused, and nearly executed for the crime of refusing to be victimized further. And Wade Garrett had orchestrated all of it. You don't understand what he's capable of, Elena protested. He owns this town. The deputies, the mayor, half the businesses. Men who cross him end up losing their land, their livelihoods, sometimes their lives. And he's very good at making it look legal. Then we'll have to be smarter than him, Caleb said. We'll have to prove what really happened. With what evidence? My word against his? That didn't work so well the first time. Then we find new evidence. We find witnesses. There are no witnesses, Elena cut him off, her voice sharp with frustration. Thomas and I lived alone. When Garrett killed him, it was just the 2 of us there. It's his word against mine, and he has a badge and 3 deputies who'll swear to anything he says. Caleb sat back, thinking. She was right. Without evidence, this was impossible. Garrett had covered his tracks too well. But there had to be something, some thread they could pull that would unravel his story. What about the cabin? Emma asked suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. What cabin, sweetheart? Caleb asked. The one where we met Miss Elena during the storm. Emma looked at Elena with wide, serious eyes. You were there alone. Why? Elena's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding. I was running. That was my second attempt to leave Thomas. I'd made it almost to the territorial border when the storm hit, found that old trapper's cabin and holed up, thinking I'd wait it out and keep moving when it cleared. But you came back, Sarah said, after the storm. You went back to Thomas. I didn't have a choice. No money, no supplies, no plan. I was half frozen and starving. I thought maybe if I went back and apologized, if I played the dutiful wife for a while longer, I could save up enough to try again. Do it right the next time. Her voice dropped. I was stupid. You were surviving, Caleb corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because I survived right into a noose. You're not in a noose, Sarah pointed out. You're here with us, and we're going to help you. Elena looked at the little girl with something like wonder. You have so much faith, both of you. How? Mama taught us, Emma said simply. She said faith is just deciding to believe in good things, even when bad things are happening. And good things are happening now. You're here. You're safe. Papa claimed you, so the sheriff can't touch you. For now, Elena murmured. But what happens when... A knock at the door made everyone freeze. It was heavy, authoritative. The knock of someone who expected to be answered immediately. Caleb stood slowly, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle he kept by the door. Girls, take Elena upstairs. Papa, Sarah started. Now. Something in his voice made them obey. Sarah and Emma grabbed Elena's hands and pulled her toward the stairs. Elena looked back at Caleb, fear clear in her eyes, but she went. Caleb waited until he heard the upstairs door close, then opened the front door. Wade Garrett stood on his porch, flanked by 2 deputies. The sheriff's smile was friendly, but his eyes were cold. Morning, Ward. Hope I'm not interrupting breakfast. You are, actually, Caleb said, not moving from the doorway. What do you want, Sheriff? Just doing my duty, checking on our new resident, making sure she made it through the night without incident. Garrett tried to peer past Caleb into the house. She didn't give you any trouble, did she? None at all. Really? Because I'd hate to think you were being too trusting. Woman like that, you need to keep a close eye on her. Lock your bedroom door at night, if you know what I mean. I appreciate the advice, Caleb said dryly. Anything else? Garrett's smile tightened. Actually, yes. I need to speak with Mrs. Cross. Just a few follow-up questions about her husband's death. Standard procedure. She's resting. The injuries you gave her yesterday are pretty severe. Maybe your questions can wait. Now, Ward, I didn't give her any injuries. She got those resisting arrest, and my questions can't wait. This is a murder investigation. Investigation's closed, isn't it? You said she confessed. You convicted her in the town square. What's left to investigate? The 2 deputies shifted uncomfortably, but Garrett's expression didn't change. There are always details to finalize. Now, are you going to let me talk to her, or do I need to come back with a warrant? A warrant for what? She's my wife now, according to your law. What happens in my house is my business. Not when it involves murder, it's not. They stared at each other, the tension stretching taut between them. Caleb knew he was on dangerous ground. Garrett could make his life hell if he wanted to, but something in him refused to back down, refused to let this man terrorize Elena any further. She'll answer your questions, Caleb said finally. Here, in my presence. And not today. She needs time to recover. How long? A week? Maybe 2. Garrett's jaw clenched. 2 days. And Ward? Don't think about running with her. I've got men watching every road out of this territory. You try to leave, I'll have you both arrested for obstruction of justice. He tipped his hat mockingly and turned to leave. His deputies followed, but one of them, a younger man Caleb didn't recognize, glanced back with something that might have been sympathy in his eyes. Caleb closed the door and leaned against it, his heart pounding. 2 days. They had 2 days to figure out what to do before Garrett came back with more questions and fewer pleasantries. Footsteps on the stairs made him look up. Elena descended slowly, the girls right behind her. He's watching the roads, she said. It wasn't a question. He says he is. Then I'm trapped here, and so are you. I should go, turn myself in, before he hurts your family. No, Sarah and Emma said in unison. We're not giving up, Sarah added. Mama never gave up, even when she was sick. She fought until the very end. You have to fight too. Elena looked at Caleb, her expression desperate. How? How do we fight a man who controls everything? Caleb thought about it, turning the problem over in his mind. Garrett controlled the town, the law, the witnesses. He had power and influence and no apparent conscience. Fighting him head-on would be suicide. But there was one thing Garrett didn't control. We need to get your story out, Caleb said slowly. Beyond Redemption Creek, to people who don't answer to Garrett, territorial authorities maybe, or newspaper reporters from Silver Springs or Carson City, someone who can investigate independently. They won't believe me any more than the people here did, Elena said. Maybe not, but they might believe evidence. We need to find something, anything, that proves Garrett killed your husband. Letters, witnesses, financial records, something he missed when he was covering his tracks. Like what? I don't know yet, but we've got 2 days to figure it out. Elena shook her head, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Something like hope. This is insane. You're risking everything for someone you barely know. We know enough, Caleb said firmly. We know you saved my daughters. We know Garrett's a liar and a murderer. We know you deserve better than what this town gave you. That's enough to start with. The rest of the day passed in tense planning. Caleb sent the girls to their lessons while he and Elena sat at the kitchen table trying to piece together anything that might help their case. Thomas kept records, Elena said, of his gambling debts, his business with Garrett. He was meticulous about that kind of thing. Paranoid, really. Always worried someone would try to cheat him. Where are these records now? In our house, I assume. Unless Garrett destroyed them. Would he know to look for them? Elena considered. Maybe not. Thomas kept them hidden behind a loose board in the bedroom closet. He thought I didn't know, but I found them months ago when I was looking for anything I could sell to fund my escape. What was in them? Debts, mostly, names and amounts, but there were also notes about jobs Garrett had given him, deliveries, pickups. Some of it sounded questionable, like maybe Garrett was running something illegal and using Thomas as a go-between. Caleb leaned forward. If we could get those records, if they show Garrett had a reason to kill Thomas beyond just wanting you, that might be enough to raise doubts. Get territorial authorities interested. How do we get them? The house is probably locked up, and even if it's not, Garrett will have someone watching it. Maybe, or maybe he thinks he's already won, that you're safely locked away out here and there's no reason to keep watching an empty house. Elena looked skeptical. That's a big maybe. It's all we've got. They spent the afternoon refining the plan. Caleb would ride into town after dark, claiming he needed supplies he'd forgotten. While there, he'd slip into Elena's old house and search for the records. It was risky. If Garrett caught him, it would look like he was helping a murderer destroy evidence. But doing nothing felt riskier. As sunset approached, Sarah and Emma came in from their lessons, immediately sensing the tension in the air. "You're going to do something dangerous, aren't you, Papa?" Sarah asked. Caleb wanted to lie, to protect them from worry, but Margaret had taught him better than that. "Yes, but it's necessary. Elena needs help, and this is the only way I can think to provide it." "We could come with you," Emma suggested. "Absolutely not." "But, no. You stay here with Elena. Keep the doors locked. If anyone comes except me, you hide. Understand?" The girls nodded reluctantly. "I'll be back before midnight," Caleb promised. "Just a quick trip into town and back." He was preparing the horse when Elena found him in the barn. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I know I keep saying that, but it's true. You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. You saved my daughters' lives. That's a debt I can never fully repay. They would have survived without me." "Maybe, but you didn't know that when you helped them. You just saw people in trouble and acted. That's worth something." Elena moved closer, her expression serious in the fading light. "Caleb, if this goes wrong, if Garrett catches you, he won't just arrest you. He'll destroy you, take your land, your daughters, everything." "I know." "And you're still going?" "I'm still going." She studied his face for a long moment. "Why? And don't say it's because of the debt. There's something else, something you're not saying." Caleb checked the saddle, buying himself time to think. She was right, of course. The debt was part of it, but not all of it. "When Margaret was dying," he said finally, "she made me promise something. Not to take care of the girls, that was obvious, but to teach them, to show them through my actions what it means to be a good person, to stand up when standing up is hard, to help when helping is dangerous, to choose right over easy." He met Elena's eyes. "These past 3 years I've been safe, careful, keeping my head down, avoiding trouble, just trying to survive. But that's not what Margaret wanted for them. That's not the example I want to set. So yeah, maybe this is partially about you, but it's also about me, about being the kind of father, the kind of man I want to be, Elena's eyes glistened with tears. Your wife was lucky to have you. No, I was lucky to have her, and now I'm trying not to disappoint her memory. Without warning, Elena stepped forward and hugged him, quick and fierce and over almost before it began. Be careful, please. Those girls need you. I will be. And Elena, while I'm gone, if something happens, if Garrett shows up or anything feels wrong, there's a rifle behind the kitchen door. You know how to use one? Thomas made sure I learned. He liked to hunt. Good. Don't hesitate if you need to use it. Protecting yourself isn't murder, it's justice. The ride into Redemption Creek took an hour, long enough for Caleb to second-guess himself 100 times. What was he doing? Breaking into a dead man's house to steal potential evidence based on the word of a woman accused of murder? If Garrett caught him, there'd be no talking his way out of it. But when he thought of Elena's face, the bruises, the fear, the desperate hope that someone might finally believe her, he kept riding. He entered town from the east, avoiding the main street. The Cross House was on the edge of town, a small, run-down place that had seen better days. No light showed in the windows, and no horses were tied outside. Either Garrett wasn't watching it, or his watchers were better hidden than Caleb hoped. He tied his horse 2 streets over and approached on foot, keeping to the shadows. The back door was locked, but the window beside it had a loose latch he was able to work open with his knife. Inside, the house smelled of death and abandonment. Caleb lit a small candle, shielding the flame with his hand, and moved through the main room. Signs of violence were everywhere: overturned furniture, bloodstains on the floor, the outline of where a body had fallen. Thomas Cross had died badly. Whatever else he'd been, he hadn't deserved that. Caleb found the bedroom and the closet Elena had described. The loose board took some searching, but he found it eventually, prying it up to reveal a small hollow space underneath. Inside were 3 leather-bound journals and a stack of papers bound with string. Caleb grabbed them all, tucking them inside his jacket. He was turning to leave when he heard voices outside. Men's voices, getting closer. He froze, extinguishing the candle. Through the window he could see 2 figures approaching the house, deputies probably, making rounds. Thought Garrett said nobody'd be stupid enough to come here, one voice said. Just checking. Besides, maybe that Ward fellow's stupider than he looks. Sheriff said to watch for him. Caleb's heart hammered. The back window was too far. They'd see him if he tried to climb out. The front door was closer, but would put him right in their path. That left only one option. He moved quickly into the bedroom, climbing onto the bed and pressing himself against the wall behind the headboard. It was a terrible hiding spot, but it was dark and the deputies would have no reason to look closely if they didn't expect anyone to be here. The front door opened. Footsteps creaked across the wooden floor. See? Nobody here, the first voice said. Check the bedroom. Garrett wants to be sure. More footsteps, closer now. A match struck, light flaring. Caleb held his breath, making himself as small as possible in the shadows. The deputy's light swept the room once, twice, paused on the open closet door and the disturbed floorboard. Hey, Charlie, come look at this. The second deputy joined the first. That board's been moved recently. Wasn't like that when we checked yesterday. Think someone's been here? Either that or rats, big ones. They both laughed, but it was nervous laughter. They were spooked. Should we report it? And tell Garrett what? That a floorboard moved? He'll think we're idiots. Let's just nail it back down and say everything was secure. Caleb listened to them hammer the board back into place, effectively sealing the now empty hiding spot. If they'd come an hour earlier, he would have found nothing. Luck was finally on his side. The deputies left, still arguing about whether to mention the floorboard. Caleb waited a full 10 minutes after their voices faded before moving. His legs had cramped from staying still so long, and the journals pressed uncomfortably against his ribs, but he'd gotten what he came for. The ride home felt twice as long as the ride out, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible pursuit. But Caleb made it back to the ranch without incident, arriving just before midnight as he'd promised. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the kitchen window. When he opened the door, he found Elena sitting at the table, the rifle across her lap, waiting. "You're back," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I'm back? The girls?" "Sleeping. I checked on them every 10 minutes. And no visitors?" "No one." Caleb pulled the journals and papers from his jacket, laying them on the table. These are what you told me about? Elena's eyes widened. You got them. I wasn't sure it would work. Almost didn't. 2 deputies showed up while I was there, but I got lucky. Elena reached for the journals with trembling hands, opening the top one. Her expression changed as she read, cycling through recognition, disgust, and something that might have been vindication. This is it, she whispered. This is everything. Thomas documented every job Garrett gave him, every illegal delivery, every bribe, names, dates, amounts. She looked up at Caleb, her face flushed with excitement. This proves Garrett's been running illegal operations for years. And look, she flipped to a page near the end. 3 weeks before Thomas died, there's a note about a special arrangement regarding his debts. Garrett told him he'd forgive everything if Thomas could deliver EC. That's me. Elena Cross. So Garrett wanted you specifically. This proves premeditation. It proves motive. If Thomas failed to deliver me, or if I went public about what Garrett wanted, this whole operation could have been exposed. Killing Thomas and framing me solves both problems, eliminates a witness, and silences me. Caleb sat down heavily. This could work. If we can get this to territorial authorities, they won't accept it, not without Thomas here to verify it. Garrett will just claim these are forgeries, that I created them to frame him. Maybe, but it's enough to raise questions, enough to start an independent investigation. That's all we need. Someone outside Garrett's control looking into this. Elena clutched the journals to her chest. We need to move fast. Once Garrett realizes these are missing, he'll know someone's working against him. He'll come after you directly. Let him come. We'll be ready. But even as Caleb said it, he felt the weight of what they'd started settling over him. They'd crossed a line tonight, moved from passive resistance to active opposition. Wade Garrett wouldn't forgive that. And when he came for them, not if, but when, it would be with everything he had. Upstairs, Sarah and Emma slept peacefully, trusting their father to keep them safe. Caleb looked at the journals spread across the table, at Elena's determined face, and made a silent promise to Margaret's memory. He would see this through, whatever it cost, whatever it took. Because his daughters were watching, learning what it meant to stand up against injustice, and he wouldn't teach them to look away. The next morning brought a visitor Caleb hadn't expected. He was in the barn mucking out stalls when he heard a horse approaching at a controlled pace, not the aggressive thunder of Garrett's men, but something more deliberate. He grabbed the pitchfork defensively and moved to the barn door just as a stranger dismounted in his yard. The man was tall and lean, maybe 40, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of hard travel. He wore a nice suit that had seen better days and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who knew how to handle trouble when it found him. A leather satchel hung from his shoulder, and his eyes, sharp and intelligent, took in everything about the ranch in a single sweep. "Caleb Ward?" the man called out. "Depends on who's asking." The stranger smiled, reaching slowly into his jacket. Caleb tensed, but the man pulled out nothing more dangerous than a calling card, which he held up between 2 fingers. "Lucas Cross. I'm looking for my sister." Caleb's grip on the pitchfork loosened slightly. Elena never mentioned a brother. "We haven't spoken in 3 years. Family disagreement that seems pretty stupid now." Lucas's expression darkened. "I heard what happened in Redemption Creek. Came as soon as I could." "How did you hear?" "I'm a journalist, reporter for the Silver Springs Gazette. We get telegrams about major events in nearby territories, murders, trials, that sort of thing. When I saw Elena's name..." He shook his head. "I should have come sooner. Should have checked on her after she married that bastard." Something in the man's voice, the genuine regret, the barely controlled anger, made Caleb lower the pitchfork completely. "She's in the house, but before I take you to her, I need to know something. You here to help or to take her back to Garrett?" Lucas's jaw clenched. "I'm here to burn Wade Garrett's world to the ground. That answer your question?" Caleb nodded slowly. "Come on then. But if you upset her, journalist or not, you're leaving." They found Elena in the kitchen with Sarah and Emma, teaching them how to make bread. She had flour on her nose and was laughing at something Emma had said, the first time Caleb had heard her laugh since she'd arrived. It was a good sound, light and genuine, and it made his chest ache for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. Then Elena looked up and saw who stood in the doorway. Every trace of laughter vanished. The color drained from her face. Lucas? Hey, El. Lucas's voice was soft, almost gentle. Been a while. Elena's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. What are you doing here? Heard you got yourself into some trouble. Thought you might need help. 3 years, Lucas. 3 years of silence, and now you show up? I know. I'm sorry. You should have answered my letters, Elena cut him off, her voice shaking. The ones I sent after I married Thomas. The ones where I asked for help. The ones you ignored. Lucas flinched like she'd struck him. I never got any letters, El. I swear. If I had known... Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything. Caleb could see the conversation spiraling, could see Elena's walls going back up. He exchanged glances with his daughters, and Sarah, bless her heart, immediately understood. Miss Elena, should we finish the bread? She asked innocently. Elena looked down at the dough like she'd forgotten it existed. Yes, sweetheart. Let me just... We can do it ourselves, Emma said firmly. Papa, why don't you take Miss Elena and Mr. Cross to the sitting room? They need to talk. Caleb wanted to kiss both his daughters for their wisdom. Good idea. Come on, you two. Let's give the girls some space. The sitting room was small and rarely used. Margaret's piano still sat in the corner, gathering dust, but it offered privacy. Elena and Lucas sat on opposite sides of the room, the 3 years of silence between them like a physical barrier. Start from the beginning, Caleb said, sitting in Margaret's old chair. And both of you be honest. We don't have time for family politics right now. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. El, I never got your letters. I didn't even know you'd gotten married until 6 months after the fact, and by then... He paused, struggling with the words. By then I figured you didn't want to hear from me. After our fight, after the things I said about Thomas. Wait, Elena interrupted. What fight? We never fought about Thomas. Yes, we did. Right before you left Silver Springs. I told you he seemed like bad news, that you were rushing into things. You said I was being controlling and overprotective. Said you didn't need a brother who couldn't be happy for you. Lucas looked genuinely confused. You don't remember? Elena shook her head slowly. Lucas, that conversation never happened. The last time I saw you was at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. You were leaving for an assignment in Carson City. You told me to write to you there, gave me the address. That was it. No fight, no argument about Thomas. The two siblings stared at each other, and Caleb could see them both doing the math, working through the implications. Someone intercepted our correspondence, Lucas said finally. Made sure neither of us got the other's messages. Thomas, Elena whispered. He must have found the address you gave me, intercepted your letters before I could see them. And if you were writing to the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson forwarded my mail to wherever I was working. But if Thomas convinced her you'd moved without leaving a forwarding address... Lucas stood up, pacing. That son of a bitch isolated you, cut you off from everyone who might have helped you. He was always very charming to Mrs. Henderson, Elena said, her voice hollow. Always asking about mail, offering to deliver it for her since we lived so close. She probably thought she was doing me a favor. Caleb felt his anger at Thomas Cross, already substantial, multiply tenfold. The man had been methodical in his abuse, cutting Elena off from her only family, making sure she had nowhere to run. I'm sorry, Lucas said, and there were tears in his eyes now. El, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if I had pushed harder to find you... You couldn't have known. Elena's voice was thick with emotion. And I should have tried harder to reach you. Should have gone to Carson City myself instead of just writing. You were trying to survive. Don't blame yourself for that. They crossed the room at the same time, meeting in an embrace that spoke of years of separation and the fierce relief of finding each other again. Caleb looked away, giving them privacy for their reunion. When they finally pulled apart, Lucas wiped his eyes and turned to Caleb. Okay, tell me everything. And I mean everything. What happened? What Garrett did? What evidence you have? I'm here to help, and I'm not leaving until that bastard is behind bars. They spent the next 2 hours going through it all. Elena's story, Thomas's journals, Garrett's corruption, the town square spectacle. Lucas took notes in a small leather book. his journalist's mind cataloging facts and names and dates with practiced efficiency. "This is good," he said finally, tapping the journals. "This is really good. But Elena's right. Garrett will claim they're forgeries. We need something more. Something he can't deny." "Like what?" Caleb asked. "Like a witness. Someone who saw what really happened the night Thomas died. Someone Garrett doesn't control." "There wasn't anyone else there," Elena said. "I told you, it was just me and Garrett and Thomas's body." "What about neighbors? Someone who might have seen Garrett going into your house that night?" "Our nearest neighbor was old Mrs. Patterson, and she went to bed at sundown every night. Wouldn't have seen anything." Lucas drummed his fingers on the arm of the chair, thinking. "What about the deputies who heard you confess? Any chance one of them has a conscience?" "Garrett picks his men carefully," Caleb said. "They're loyal because he pays well and protects them. Breaking ranks would mean losing everything. Everyone has a breaking point. We just need to find it." Lucas looked at Elena. "These deputies who swore you confessed, did any of them seem uncomfortable? Hesitant? Like maybe they didn't fully believe what they were saying?" Elena thought back to that terrible day. "There was one. Younger than the others. He wouldn't look at me when he testified, kept his eyes on the ground." "What's his name?" "I don't know. I'd never seen him before. He must be new." Caleb sat up straighter. "I saw him yesterday, when Garrett came to the ranch. One of the deputies looked, I don't know, sympathetic maybe, like he didn't fully agree with what was happening." "That's our target," Lucas said decisively. "The weak link. We find out who he is, what matters to him, what leverage we can use, and we convince him to tell the truth." "That's a lot of assumptions," Elena said. "What if he's just as corrupt as the others?" "Then we find another way. But in my experience, young men who won't make eye contact during a false testimony are usually young men with consciences. We just need to give that conscience a push." Over the next day, Lucas proved why he was a good journalist. He rode into Redemption Creek under the guise of covering Thomas Cross's murder for his newspaper, asking questions, talking to locals, piecing together information. He was friendly and charming, and just persistent enough to be annoying without being threatening. And he found out that the young deputy's name was Michael Chen, 23 years old, originally from San Francisco, who'd only been working for Garrett for 6 months. His father runs a mercantile on the edge of town, Lucas reported that evening, sitting at Caleb's kitchen table with notes spread everywhere. Respectable family. The father's apparently furious that his son took a job with Garrett instead of joining the family business. "So the kid's trying to prove something," Caleb said. "Exactly. Trying to be his own man, which means he's young, idealistic, and probably not as comfortable with corruption as Garrett's other deputies." "How do we approach him?" Elena asked. "Carefully. If we spook him, he runs to Garrett, and we lose our chance. If we push too hard, same result. We need to make him feel like telling the truth is the brave thing to do, the right thing to do." "And how do we do that?" Caleb asked. Lucas smiled. "We give him a way out. A story where he's the hero instead of the accomplice. Journalists call it reframing the narrative." The plan took shape over dinner. Lucas would approach Michael Chen privately, away from Garrett's other deputies. He'd appeal to the young man's conscience, show him the journals, explain what really happened. And he'd offer him something Garrett never would, a chance to do the right thing and be protected while doing it. "Protected how?" Elena asked skeptically. "Garrett runs this territory. Where could this kid go that would be safe?" "I have contacts in San Francisco, other journalists, lawyers, people who'd be very interested in a corruption case this size. If Michael testifies, I can get him out of here before Garrett knows what happened. Get him somewhere safe where he can tell his story to people who matter." "It's a long shot," Caleb said. "It's the only shot we have. Unless you've got a better idea?" Caleb didn't. None of them did. The next morning, Lucas rode back to town to find Michael Chen. Caleb wanted to go with him, but Lucas insisted it would be better alone. Less intimidating, easier for the deputy to open up. "If I'm not back by nightfall, assume it didn't work," Lucas said as he mounted his horse, "and start planning your next move." The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Caleb tried to focus on ranch work, but his mind kept drifting to what might be happening in town. Elena paced the house like a caged animal, unable to sit still, jumping at every sound. Even Sarah and Emma were subdued, sensing the tension. Sunset came and went. No Lucas. Caleb was considering riding to town himself when he heard hoofbeats. 2 horses this time, moving fast. He grabbed his rifle and positioned himself at the window. Elena pulled the girls close, ready to run upstairs if needed. But when the riders came into view, Caleb felt his breath catch. Lucas was in front, and behind him rode a young man in a deputy's uniform, looking terrified and determined in equal measure. Michael Chen had come. They burst into the house, Michael's eyes darting around like he expected an ambush. Lucas was grinning like a man who just won a fortune. "Tell them," Lucas said to Michael. "Tell them what you told me." Michael swallowed hard, looking at Elena. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did, what I said. It was wrong." "Start from the beginning," Caleb said firmly. "We need to hear all of it." Michael nodded, his hands shaking. "The night Thomas Cross died, Sheriff Garrett called me to the Cross house. Said there'd been a murder and he needed help securing the scene. When I got there, he was alone with the body, no sign of Mrs. Cross." "Keep going," Lucas encouraged. "He told me what to say, that Mrs. Cross had confessed to the murder when we arrested her. Said it would make the case easier, cleaner, that we were just helping justice move faster." Michael's voice cracked. "I didn't question it. I was new, and Garrett was the sheriff. I thought he knew what he was doing." "When did you realize he didn't?" Caleb asked. "The next day, in the town square. When I saw Mrs. Cross's face, the way she looked at Garrett, the way he looked at her." Michael met Elena's eyes. That wasn't a murderer looking at justice. That was a victim looking at her abuser, and I knew I'd helped put an innocent woman on trial. "Why didn't you say something then?" Elena's voice was hard. "I was scared. Garrett's killed men for less than speaking against him. I saw what he did to Deputy Morrison last year when Morrison questioned one of his decisions." Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. "They found Morrison in the river 2 weeks later, said it was an accident." The room went silent. Even Lucas, who'd heard this story once already, looked shaken. "But you're here now," Sarah said suddenly, her young voice cutting through the tension. "You came to tell the truth. That makes you brave." Michael looked at the little girl, and something in his expression softened. "I hope so. I really hope so." "What you need to understand," Lucas said, pulling out the journals, "is that this is bigger than one murder. Garrett's been running illegal operations for years. Extortion, smuggling, maybe worse. Thomas Cross documented all of it, and now we have proof." He spread the journals across the table, and Michael's eyes widened as he read. This is everything. Names, dates, amounts. Half the town's involved." Michael looked up, pale. "If this gets out, Garrett doesn't just lose his badge. He goes to prison for the rest of his life." Exactly. Which is why we need your testimony. Someone who can verify that Garrett lied about Elena's confession. Someone who can start unraveling his entire operation." Lucas leaned forward. "I can protect you, Michael. Get you out of here, connect you with territorial authorities who will listen, but you have to be willing to stand up in front of people and tell the truth." Michael was quiet for a long moment, staring at the journals. Then he said, "There's something else. Something I didn't tell you earlier." "What?" Lucas asked. "The night of the murder, I was the first deputy Garrett called, but I wasn't the first person at the scene. When I arrived, there was someone else leaving, a woman. She was hurrying away from the house, looked scared. I asked Garrett who she was, and he told me to forget I saw her, said it wasn't relevant to the case." Elena leaned forward. "What did she look like?" "Older, maybe 50, gray hair. She was wearing a green dress, I remember that." Elena gasped. "Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor. She must have seen something. Heard the fight, maybe. Come over to check." "Oh, if she witnessed what really happened," Caleb said slowly, "if she saw Garrett kill Thomas, then she's been living with that knowledge for weeks," Lucas finished, probably terrified out of her mind that Garrett would kill her too if she talked. "We need to find her," Elena said. If she'll testify—" "She won't," Michael interrupted. I checked after Mr. Cross told me about his suspicions. Mrs. Patterson left town 3 days after the murder. Told her landlord she was going to stay with family in Sacramento. Hasn't been back since. Garrett scared her off, Caleb said. Or paid her off, Lucas added. Either way, she's out of reach for now. But Michael's testimony combined with these journals, that's enough to start an official investigation. Not in Redemption Creek, it's not, Michael said. Garrett owns the territorial judge. Any investigation here would be shut down before it started. Lucas smiled. Good thing I'm not planning to file in Redemption Creek. I'm taking this straight to the territorial capital. Carson City, where I happen to know a judge who hates corruption and loves making examples out of crooked sheriffs. How long will that take? Elena asked. 3, maybe 4 days. To ride there, present the evidence, get an official investigation started. Then they'll send marshals here to arrest Garrett and his deputies. 4 days. Elena looked at Caleb. Can we survive 4 days with Garrett watching us? We don't have a choice, Caleb said. It's 4 days or forever. I know which one I prefer. Michael stood up abruptly. I need to go. If Garrett notices I'm missing... You're not going back there, Lucas said firmly. You testify against him, he'll kill you before the investigation even starts. But if I disappear, he'll know something's wrong. He'll come after Mr. Ward, Mrs. Cross, everyone involved. Let him come, Caleb said, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. We'll be ready. You don't understand what you're saying, Michael protested. Garrett has a dozen men loyal to him, trained killers. You're one rancher with 2 little girls and a woman accused of murder. He'll destroy you. Maybe, Caleb acknowledged, but we're not completely defenseless, and we have something Garrett doesn't. What's that? Caleb looked around the room, at his daughters sitting bravely despite their fear, at Elena standing tall despite everything she'd endured, at Lucas and Michael who'd chosen truth over safety. We have the right, and that counts for something. They spent the rest of the evening planning. Lucas would leave at dawn for Carson City, taking the journals and Michael with him. That would give them a head start before Garrett realized anything was wrong. Meanwhile, Caleb, Elena, and the girls would stay at the ranch, fortify their position, and wait. What do I tell people if they ask about me? Michael wanted to know. Tell them nothing, Lucas said. You'll be gone before anyone notices, and once we're in Carson City, you'll be under the protection of the territorial marshal. Garrett can't touch you there. What about my father? My family? Garrett will retaliate against them. Your father hated that you worked for Garrett anyway, Lucas pointed out. I'll send him a telegram once we're safely away, tell him to close up shop and come to Carson City until this blows over. We'll protect everyone we can. It wasn't a perfect plan. There were a dozen ways it could go wrong, but it was the best chance they had. That night, after Lucas and Michael had bedded down in the barn and the girls were asleep, Caleb found Elena standing on the porch, looking out at the darkness. Can't sleep? He asked quietly. Too many thoughts, too many what-ifs. She glanced at him. You should send the girls away. To relatives, friends, anywhere but here. If Garrett comes, the girls stay with me. We're a family. We face this together. They're not my family, Caleb. They're yours. And you're risking them for a stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. And they'd never forgive me if I sent them away now. They chose you, Elena, that first day in the square. They chose you, and they don't go back on their choices. Elena was quiet for a moment. They're remarkable, both of them. Margaret raised them well. Margaret gave them a foundation, but they're building the rest themselves. Caleb leaned against the porch railing. You know what Sarah said to me earlier? She said you were brave, that it takes more courage to accept help than to refuse it. She's 9 years old. What does she know about courage? More than most adults, I think. She watched her mother die with grace and dignity, watched her face death without flinching. Sarah knows what real bravery looks like. Elena's voice was thick with tears. I don't feel brave, I feel terrified. Of Garrett, of what happens next, of hoping for something better and having it ripped away again. That's what makes it brave, doing it anyway. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets, the distant call of an owl, the soft sounds of horses shifting in the barn. Thank you, Elena said finally, for everything, for taking a chance on me. for believing me when nobody else would, for... She paused, searching for words. For showing me that there are still good men in the world. Caleb felt his chest tighten. I'm not that good, Elena. I'm just trying to do what's right. That's what makes you good. Before he could respond, before he could examine the complicated feelings her words stirred up, Sarah's voice called from inside. Papa, I had a bad dream. Caleb squeezed Elena's shoulder gently. We'll get through this. 4 days. Then it's over. Or it's just beginning, Elena said softly. But Caleb was already inside, climbing the stairs to comfort his daughter, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and her fears and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, justice was finally coming for Wade Garrett. Lucas and Michael left before dawn, riding hard for Carson City with the journals wrapped in oilcloth and tucked safely in Lucas's saddlebags. Caleb watched them disappear into the early morning mist and felt the weight of what came next settling over him. 4 days. They just had to survive 4 days. The first day passed quietly. Too quietly. Caleb worked the ranch with one eye always on the road, expecting to see Garrett's men appear at any moment. But no one came. No riders. No threats. Just an eerie silence that made his skin crawl. The second day brought visitors, but not the ones he'd feared. Doc Morrison arrived mid-morning, claiming he'd heard there was a woman at the ranch who needed medical attention. Elena was suspicious, rightly so, but the doctor seemed genuine. He examined her injuries, prescribed rest and proper nutrition, and left without asking uncomfortable questions. You think Garrett sent him? Elena asked after he'd gone. Maybe. Or maybe he's just a doctor doing his job. Caleb wasn't sure which answer he preferred. The third day, Garrett himself appeared. He came alone this time, no deputies flanking him, no show of force, just the sheriff on his horse, riding up to the ranch like he was paying a social call. Caleb met him in the yard, rifle in hand, but not aimed. Not yet. Ward, Garrett said pleasantly. Beautiful morning, isn't it? What do you want, Sheriff? Just checking in. Haven't seen Deputy Chen around town lately. Thought maybe he'd mentioned something to you. You being such good friends and all. So Garrett knew. Or suspected. Either way, the mask was off. Haven't seen him, Caleb said evenly. Maybe he got tired of working for a murderer. Garrett's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Careful, Ward. Accusations like that can get a man in trouble. Truth isn't an accusation. Truth is whatever I say it is in this territory. Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. You're playing a dangerous game. One you can't win. Whatever you think you're doing, whatever evidence you think you have, it won't matter. I've been running this territory for 15 years. Men smarter and richer than you have tried to take me down. They're all gone now, dead or disappeared. You want to join them? Is that a threat, Sheriff? It's a fact. Garrett's eyes drifted to the house where Sarah and Emma watched from the window. Nice girls you got there. Be a shame if something happened to them. Accidents happen on ranches all the time. Fires, stampedes. So many ways a man can lose everything he loves. Caleb raised the rifle now, not quite pointing it at Garrett, but making his intentions clear. Get off my land. I'm going. But Ward, when this all falls apart, and it will, when you're standing in the ruins of everything you love, wondering where you went wrong, remember I gave you a chance to walk away. Remember you chose this. Garrett turned his horse and rode off slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world, because he probably thought he did. Caleb stood in the yard long after the sheriff disappeared, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. He'd faced down bulls, broken wild horses, survived drought and disease and the death of his wife. But he'd never felt as powerless as he did now, knowing that a corrupt sheriff had just threatened his daughters, and there was nothing he could do about it except wait and hope Lucas succeeded. That night, Elena found him sitting in Margaret's old chair, staring at nothing. He threatened the girls, Caleb said without preamble. Elena sat down across from him. I heard. I'm sorry. I should send them away. Should have sent them away days ago. You won't, though. No, I won't. Because Sarah was right. We're family. And families don't abandon each other when things get hard. Elena studied his face in the lamplight. You include me in that. Family. It wasn't a question, but Caleb answered anyway. Yes. We barely know each other. I know you saved my daughters. I know you survived hell and came out still fighting. I know you're brave and kind and stronger than you give yourself credit for. That's enough. Is it? Because in 4 days, when Lucas gets back, when Garrett's arrested, when this is all over, what then? I'm still the woman accused of murder, still the sheriff's victim, still broken in 100 ways you can't see. Caleb leaned forward, his voice intense. Then we deal with it, together. You think I'm not broken too? That losing Margaret didn't shatter me into pieces I'm still trying to put back together? We're all broken, Elena. All of us. But we don't have to be broken alone. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You're a good man, Caleb Ward. Better than I deserve. Don't say that. Don't ever say that. You deserve everything good this world has to offer, and I'm going to make sure you get it. The 4th day dawned bright and clear. Caleb had barely slept, every sound making him reach for his rifle. But morning came without incident, and he started to hope, really hope, that they might actually pull this off. He was feeding the horses when he heard it, the sound of multiple riders approaching fast. His heart sank. Too many for Lucas and Michael. Too many for good news. He ran to the house, shouting for Elena to get the girls upstairs. She obeyed without question, herding Sarah and Emma toward their hiding spot while Caleb took position at the window with his rifle. But when the riders came into view, Caleb's breath caught. Lucas was in front, as expected. Michael rode beside him. But behind them came 4 men in official territorial marshal uniforms, badges gleaming in the morning sun. And at the back of the group, looking tired but triumphant, rode Judge Morrison from Carson City himself. They'd done it. Lucas dismounted quickly, grinning ear to ear. Sorry we're late. Judge Morrison insisted on coming himself, said he wanted to see Garrett's face when the warrant was served. One of the marshals stepped forward, a tall man with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. Caleb Ward? I'm Marshal Thomas Fletcher. We have warrants for the arrest of Wade Garrett and 6 of his deputies on charges of murder, corruption, extortion, and conspiracy. We're here to take them into custody. Caleb could barely process the words. Just like that? Just like that, Judge Morrison said, dismounting with a grunt. Mr. Cross presented very compelling evidence, combined with Deputy Chen's testimony and the financial records we found. He smiled grimly. Garrett's reign is over. Where is he now? Caleb asked. In Redemption Creek, presumably. We're heading there next to make the arrests. I wanted to stop here first, make sure Mrs. Cross was safe. The judge looked toward the house. Is she here? Elena emerged from the house slowly, the girls at her side. She looked at Lucas, at the marshals, at the judge, like she couldn't quite believe they were real. Mrs. Cross, Judge Morrison said formally. On behalf of the territorial government, I apologize for the grave injustice done to you. All charges against you are hereby dismissed. You're a free woman. Elena's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Sarah and Emma immediately wrapped their arms around her, and Caleb heard Sarah whisper, See? We told you it would be okay. We told you Papa would fix it. I had help, Caleb said, his own voice rough with emotion. He looked at Lucas. Thank you for everything. Lucas shrugged, but he was smiling. That's what family does. Marshal Fletcher cleared his throat. We should move. I want Garrett in custody before word spreads that we're here. Can you direct us to the sheriff's office? I'll do better than that, Caleb said. I'll come with you. I want to see his face when you arrest him. Papa, no, Emma protested. It's too dangerous. It's over, sweetheart. The danger's past. But I need to be there. Need to see this through. Elena stood up, wiping her eyes. Then I'm coming too. I want him to see me. Want him to know he didn't win. Judge Morrison looked like he might object, then nodded. Both of you can come. But you stay back and let the marshals do their job. Understood? They understood. The ride into Redemption Creek felt surreal. Just days ago, Caleb had watched Elena being offered like property in the town square. Now he was riding beside her and 6 territorial officers, coming to arrest the man who'd orchestrated it all. The town was busy when they arrived, people going about their daily business. But when they saw the marshals, everything stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Shopkeepers came to their doors. Even the children playing in the street went quiet. Marshal Fletcher rode straight to the sheriff's office and dismounted. "Everyone stay here." He and two other marshals entered the building. Moments later, raised voices could be heard. Then a crash, like furniture being overturned. Then Garrett's voice, loud and indignant. "You can't do this. I'm the sheriff here. This is my jurisdiction." "Not anymore," Fletcher's voice carried clearly. "Wade Garrett, you're under arrest for murder, corruption, and conspiracy. You have the right to—" Garrett appeared in the doorway, being dragged by two marshals. His face was purple with rage, his eyes wild. But when he saw Elena sitting tall on her horse beside Caleb, something in his expression shifted. Fear. For the first time since Caleb had known him, Wade Garrett looked afraid. "You!" Garrett snarled at Elena. "You did this! You lying!" "That's enough," Marshal Fletcher said sharply, forcing Garrett toward a waiting wagon. "Save it for your trial." The crowd that had gathered was growing now, people pushing close to see their sheriff being arrested. Caleb recognized faces from the town square, people who'd watched Elena being offered as property and done nothing, people who'd believed Garrett's lies without question. Judge Morrison stood up in his saddle, his voice carrying across the square. "Citizens of Redemption Creek, Wade Garrett stands accused of serious crimes against this territory and its people. An investigation will begin immediately into his activities and the activities of anyone who aided him. If you have information relevant to this case, you will be contacted." That is all. As the marshals loaded Garrett into the wagon, the sheriff's eyes found Elena one last time. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You think you've won, but it is over," Elena said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent square. "You're finished, Wade, and I'm free. That's all that matters." Garrett opened his mouth to respond, but Marshal Fletcher slammed the wagon door shut, cutting him off. As the wagon pulled away, taking Wade Garrett toward justice, Caleb heard something he'd never expected to hear. Applause. It started with one person, old Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house. Then another joined in, then another. Soon the whole square was clapping, some people even cheering. They weren't celebrating Garrett's arrest specifically, Caleb realized. They were celebrating the end of his tyranny. The freedom to finally speak up, to finally admit what everyone had known but been too afraid to say, that their sheriff was a monster, and they were glad he was gone. Elena sat frozen on her horse, tears streaming down her face, as the town that had condemned her now applauded her vindication. "Come on," Caleb said gently, touching her arm. "Let's go home." They rode back to the ranch slowly, Lucas beside them, everyone too emotionally exhausted to speak. When they arrived, Sarah and Emma burst from the house, having been told to wait behind with Doc Morrison for safety. "Is it over?" Sarah demanded. "Is he arrested? Is Miss Elena really free?" "It's over," Caleb confirmed, dismounting. "The bad man is gone. Elena's free. We're all safe now." The girls cheered, grabbing Elena's hands and pulling her into a dance of pure joy. Lucas laughed, joining in. Even Caleb couldn't help but smile. That night, they had a celebration dinner. Nothing fancy, just good food and better company. Judge Morrison and the marshals had stayed in town to begin their investigation, but Lucas remained and Doc Morrison stopped by with a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. "To justice," the doctor said, raising his glass. "However delayed." "To family," Lucas added, looking at his sister with pride. "And second chances." "To courage," Caleb said, glancing at his daughters. "And the people who show us how to be brave." Elena raised her glass last, her hand shaking slightly. "To new beginnings, and to the people who give us reasons to hope." They clinked glasses, and for the first time in weeks, maybe years, Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. The fear, the constant vigilance, the weight of carrying everything alone. It was starting to fade, replaced by something lighter, something that felt remarkably like hope. The morning after the celebration, reality set in with the gentleness of dawn light filtering through curtains. Elena woke in Margaret's old room, her room now, she supposed, and for the first time in months, she didn't wake with her heart racing, didn't immediately scan for threats or plan escape routes. She simply woke, stretched, and allowed herself to feel the unfamiliar sensation of safety. Downstairs, she found Caleb already in the kitchen, making coffee with the practiced ease of a man who'd done it alone for too long. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression made her pause. A warmth that hadn't been there before, or maybe had been there all along, but she'd been too scared to notice. "Morning," he said, pouring her a cup without asking. He'd learned how she took it over the past week, strong, with just a touch of sugar, small details that somehow felt enormous. "Morning." Elena accepted the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. Neither of them pulled away quickly. "Couldn't sleep?" "Slept better than I have in years, actually. Just woke early out of habit." He smiled slightly. "Ranch doesn't stop running just because the bad guy got arrested." "No, I suppose it doesn't." Elena sat at the table, the same table where they'd pored over Thomas's journals, where they'd planned and worried and hoped. Now it was just a table again, waiting to become part of normal life. What happens now? The question hung in the air, heavier than she'd intended. Caleb sat down across from her, his hands wrapped around his own cup. "That depends. Lucas mentioned heading back to Silver Springs tomorrow, said you were welcome to come with him. Start fresh somewhere. You're not the woman who was almost hanged for murder." Elena's chest tightened. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "What I want doesn't matter. This is about what's best for you." "Stop doing that," Elena said, more sharply than she meant to. "Stop acting like you don't get a say in this. You saved my life, Caleb. You and your daughters. That means your opinion matters. So tell me honestly, do you want me to stay or go?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I want you to stay. The girls want you to stay. But wanting and needing are different things. You don't owe us anything, Elena. You're free now, really free. And that means you get to choose what comes next without obligation or debt clouding your judgment. What if I choose to stay? Then you stay. We figure it out. What that looks like, what it means. But you need to be sure. Because this life," he gestured around the simple kitchen, "it's not easy. It's early mornings and hard work and isolation. The nearest town just watched you almost die. Some of those people will apologize, but some won't. Some will always believe Garrett's lies no matter what evidence says otherwise." "I know all that." Elena leaned forward. "I've lived hard before, Caleb. I can do it again. What I can't do anymore is live afraid. And for the first time in years, when I'm here, I'm not afraid. Your daughters make me laugh. You make me feel safe. Like I can breathe. That's worth more than easy." Before Caleb could respond, small footsteps thundered down the stairs. Sarah and Emma burst into the kitchen, already dressed and ready for the day, their faces bright with the particular joy of children who'd gone to bed happy and woken up the same way. "Is Miss Elena really staying?" Emma asked, climbing into the chair beside Elena. "Forever?" "We were just discussing that," Caleb said carefully. "What's to discuss?" Sarah planted her hands on her hips in a gesture so reminiscent of Margaret that Caleb's breath caught. "She saved us. We saved her. Now we're family. That's how it works." "That's not quite how family works, sweetheart," Caleb started, but Sarah cut him off. "Yes, it is. You told us yourself. Family is the people who choose to stay when things get hard. Miss Elena chose to help us in the storm when she could have turned us away. You chose to help her when everyone else walked past. We all chose each other. That makes us family." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You're very wise for 9 years old." "We know," both girls said in unison, then giggled. The sound was so normal, so perfectly ordinary, that Elena felt something crack open in her chest, the last wall she'd been holding up, the final defense against letting herself hope for something good. "I'd like to stay," she said, looking at Caleb. "If you'll have me. Not as an obligation or a debt, just as whatever this is. Whatever it becomes." Caleb's smile was slow but genuine, reaching his eyes in a way Elena hadn't seen before. "We'd like that. All of us would like that very much." The girls cheered, already planning all the things they'd teach Elena, all the places they'd show her on the ranch. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and Elena found herself laughing, really laughing. For the first time in so long, she'd almost forgotten how it felt. Lucas left the next day as planned, but not before pulling Elena aside for a private conversation in the barn. "You're sure about this?" he asked, his journalist's instincts making him read her face carefully. "It's not too late to come with me. Start over somewhere nobody knows your name." "I'm sure." Elena smiled at her brother. "For the first time in years, I'm actually sure about something. He's a good man. I checked. Asked around town after Garrett's arrest. Everyone speaks well of Caleb Ward, says he's honest, hardworking, devoted to those girls. But Elena," Lucas's expression grew serious, "he's also a widower still grieving his wife. You need to be careful. Make sure you're not just a replacement for what he lost." "I'm not," Elena said firmly. "Margaret will always be part of this family. I'm not trying to erase her or replace her. I'm just trying to find my place alongside her memory." Lucas studied her for another moment, then nodded. "All right. I trust your judgment. But I'm only a telegram away if you need me, and I'll be back in a few months to check on you. Make sure Ward's treating you right." "He will be. They all will be." Elena hugged her brother tightly. "Thank you. For everything. For believing me when nobody else would. For fighting for me." "That's what family does," Lucas said, echoing Sarah's earlier words. "We fight for each other." After Lucas rode away, Elena stood in the yard feeling strangely bereft. Her last connection to her old life was gone now, disappearing down the dusty road toward Silver Springs. What remained was the future, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. "Miss Elena?" Sarah appeared at her elbow. "Papa said you might want to learn how to ride properly. Not just sitting in a wagon, but really riding. Would you like that?" Elena looked down at the girl's hopeful face and made a decision. "Actually, I'd like it very much. But Sarah? You and Emma can call me Elena now. Just Elena. The Miss feels too formal for family." Sarah's face lit up like sunrise. "Really? We can? Really? Did you hear that, Emma?" Sarah shouted toward the house. "We can call her Elena. Just Elena. Because we're family." Emma came running, and the three of them stood together in the yard, surrounded by mountains and sky and the promise of new beginnings. The following weeks developed a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Caleb taught Elena the intricacies of ranch life, how to saddle a horse properly, how to read weather patterns, how to mend fences and tend livestock. She was a quick learner, her hands remembering skills she'd learned as a girl before Thomas, before fear had become her constant companion. The girls threw themselves into the role of teachers with enthusiastic abandon. They showed Elena their favorite spots on the ranch, the creek where they caught frogs, the meadow where wildflowers grew in summer, the old oak tree that was perfect for climbing. They taught her their lessons, proudly demonstrating their reading and arithmetic, delighted when she praised their progress. And slowly, without anyone quite noticing when it happened, the house began to feel like a home again, instead of a museum to grief. Elena found herself humming while she cooked, something she hadn't done since she was a girl. She started tending the neglected garden behind the house, coaxing vegetables and herbs back to life. She hung curtains in the windows, simple ones made from fabric she'd bought on a trip to town with Caleb, and the way they caught the afternoon light made the whole house feel warmer. Caleb watched these small changes with something like wonder. His house had been frozen in time since Margaret died. Everything kept exactly as she'd left it, as if changing anything would be admitting she was really gone. But Elena didn't erase Margaret's presence. She honored it while gently making space for new life. Margaret's piano stayed in the sitting room, but now Elena played it sometimes, filling the house with music again. Margaret's recipes stayed in the kitchen, but Elena added her own beside them, creating a collection that belonged to both women. The town's reaction to Elena's continued presence was mixed. Some people apologized, genuinely ashamed of how they'd treated her during Garrett's reign of terror. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house brought over preserves and tears, begging forgiveness for not speaking up when it mattered. Doc Morrison became a regular visitor, checking on Elena's healing injuries and staying for coffee and conversation. But others couldn't let go of their prejudices so easily. They whispered when Elena came to town, made pointed comments about women who murdered their husbands, suggested that Caleb Ward must be desperate or deluded to keep such a woman around his innocent daughters. The first time Emma overheard such comments, Mrs. Pritchard telling her friends that it was only a matter of time before Elena showed her true colors, the little girl marched right up to the group of gossiping women and announced, "Elena saved our lives. She's brave and kind and good, and if you can't see that, you're the ones who need your eyes checked." The story spread through town like wildfire, and Caleb found himself torn between pride in his daughter's courage and concern that he was raising her to be too confrontational. "You did the right thing," Elena assured Emma that evening when the girl worried she'd disappointed her father. "Standing up for what's right is always the right thing, even when it's hard." "That's what Mama used to say," Sarah said quietly. "She said sometimes being kind means being brave enough to speak truth to people who don't want to hear it." Elena looked at Caleb, seeing the grief and pride and love warring on his face. "Your Mama was very wise." "She was," Caleb agreed, "and she'd be proud of both of you, the way you've handled everything. Elena coming here, Garrett's arrest, the town gossip. You've been braver than children should have to be." "We learned from you, Papa," Emma said simply. "You were brave when you chose Elena in the square. Even though it was scary, even though people said you were wrong, you did it anyway because it was right." That night, after the girls were in bed, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch as had become their habit. The stars were brilliant in the clear mountain air, and the silence between them was comfortable now, easy in a way it hadn't been at first. "They're remarkable children," Elena said softly. "You and Margaret did something right." "Margaret did most of it. I was just trying to keep up." Caleb smiled slightly. "But they've grown even more since you came. More confident, more sure of themselves." "They had that in them already. They just needed a reason to show it." "Maybe. Or maybe they needed to see that doing the right thing matters, that standing up against injustice isn't just words but actions." Caleb turned to look at her. "You gave them that. Gave all of us that." Elena shook her head. "I didn't give you anything. I was the one being saved, remember? You saved them first in that storm, and you've been saving us ever since, in smaller ways. Bringing life back to this house, giving the girls someone else to love and trust. Showing me that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting Margaret. I'd never ask you to forget her. I know, that's what makes it possible." Caleb reached over, his hand covering hers where it rested on the porch railing. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." Elena's heart began to race, but she kept her voice steady. "All right. Are you happy here? Really happy? Not just grateful or feeling obligated, but actually content with this life?" Elena considered the question seriously, examining her feelings with the care they deserved. "Yes," she said finally. "I am. More than I ever thought I'd be again. There are hard days, days when I remember Thomas, or when someone in town says something cruel, or when I wake up and forget for a moment that I'm safe now. But those days are getting fewer. And the good days, the days when I hear the girls laughing, when I sit at the dinner table with all of you, when I look around and realize this is my home, those days outnumber the hard ones now." Caleb's hand tightened on hers. "I'm glad, because the girls and we'd be lost without you now. You've become essential to this family in ways I didn't expect." "Essential as the cook?" Elena teased gently, trying to lighten the moment because the intensity in Caleb's eyes was making it hard to breathe. "Essential as you, just you." Caleb paused, seeming to gather courage. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing, still finding your feet. But Elena, I need you to know. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to court you properly. Not as the woman I claim to save from hanging, but as the woman I've come to—" He stopped, searching for the right words. "As the woman I've come to care for deeply." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Caleb, you don't have to answer now. Take all the time you need. But I wanted you to know where I stand, what I hope for, so there's no confusion or obligation clouding things." Elena turned to face him fully, her hand still in his. "I care for you too, and for Sarah and Emma, more than I thought I could care for anyone after Thomas. But you're right, I'm still healing, still learning who I am without fear. I need time to find that woman before I can offer her to anyone else." "Then take the time. I'll wait. We'll all wait. There's no rush, no pressure. Just know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here." They sat in comfortable silence after that, hands linked, watching the stars wheel overhead. And Elena felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace, not yet, but the promise of it. The knowledge that she had time, had safety, had people who would wait for her to heal at her own pace. The trial of Wade Garrett happened 6 weeks later in the territorial capital, and it was everything his victims could have hoped for. The evidence was overwhelming: Thomas's journals, Michael Chen's testimony, financial records showing years of corruption and extortion. Additional witnesses came forward once they knew it was safe, people who'd been terrorized into silence, finally finding their voices. Elena didn't attend the trial itself, couldn't bear the thought of being in the same room with Garrett again, even with him in chains. But Lucas sent regular updates via telegram. Caleb read them aloud at dinner, and the girls listened with fierce satisfaction as their enemy was systematically destroyed by truth and justice. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Wade Garrett was sentenced to life in the territorial prison, with no possibility of parole. His deputies who'd participated in his schemes received varying sentences based on their level of involvement. Michael Chen, who'd turned state's evidence, was pardoned completely and offered a job as a territorial deputy in Carson City. "It's over," Sarah said when Caleb finished reading the telegram announcing the verdict. "Really, truly over." "It is," Elena confirmed, and saying it aloud made it feel real. The bad man can never hurt anyone again. That night, the town of Redemption Creek held an impromptu celebration. People gathered in the same square where Elena had nearly been executed, but this time the mood was jubilant. Someone brought fiddles and guitars. Someone else brought food and drink, and people danced and sang and celebrated the end of tyranny. Caleb had planned to stay home. Public celebrations weren't really his style, but the girls begged, and Elena surprised herself by wanting to go too. She wanted to walk into that square as a free woman, wanted to show everyone that she'd survived, that she'd won. They arrived as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The crowd parted for them, and Elena felt the weight of dozens of eyes. But instead of judgment, she saw respect in most faces, gratitude even, because Elena's fight against Garrett had freed them all. "Mrs. Cross," Mayor Jenkins approached, hat in hand. He'd been one of Garrett's cronies, though investigation had shown he'd been more coward than criminal. "I owe you an apology. We all do. For what happened in this square, for what we allowed to happen." Elena looked at the mayor, at the crowd gathering to hear his words. She could hold a grudge, could make them suffer for their complicity, or she could do what Margaret would have done, offer grace while holding firm to truth. "Apology accepted," she said clearly. "But Mayor, make sure it never happens again. Make sure the next sheriff you elect is someone who serves justice, not power. Make sure the next time someone's accused they get a real trial, real representation, real justice. That's how you make amends, by doing better." The mayor nodded, and Elena saw several people in the crowd look ashamed. Good. They should feel ashamed, but shame without change was useless. The music started up again, and Caleb surprised Elena by offering his hand. "May I have this dance?" Elena hesitated. "I haven't danced since before Thomas. I might not remember how." "Then we'll figure it out together." They moved to the center of the square where other couples were swaying to the fiddle music. Caleb's hand was gentle at her waist, his other hand holding hers with careful respect for her boundaries. They moved slowly, finding their rhythm, and Elena felt something in her chest expand. This was healing. This was reclaiming. This was standing in the exact spot where she'd nearly died, and choosing instead to live, to dance, to find joy again. Sarah and Emma watched from the sidelines, grinning like they'd orchestrated the whole thing. Maybe they had, in their way. Those wise little girls who'd recognized her in the square, who'd chosen her, who'd given their father permission to hope again. As the song ended and another began, more couples joined the dancing. Doc Morrison waltzed with Mrs. Henderson. Young Michael Chen, visiting from Carson City, asked Sarah to dance, and she accepted with blushing delight, while Emma danced with her father and Elena stepped aside to catch her breath. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside her. Elena turned to find an older woman she didn't recognize, kind-faced and grandmotherly. "It is," Elena agreed. "I'm Clara Morrison, the doctor's mother. Just wanted to say, what you did, standing up to Garrett, surviving everything he threw at you, it gave a lot of us courage. Reminded us that we're stronger than we think." "I didn't do anything special. I just refused to stay down." "That's exactly what makes it special, dear." Clara patted her hand. "Takes more courage to get up than to never fall in the first place. You remember that on the hard days." The celebration lasted until well after dark. By the time Caleb loaded his sleepy daughters into the wagon, Emma already half asleep against Sarah's shoulder, the stars were out in full force and the air had turned cool. Elena sat beside Caleb on the driver's seat, wrapped in a shawl someone had lent her, feeling contentment settle over her like a blanket. The ride home was quiet except for the rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the occasional murmur of the girls in back. "Thank you," Elena said softly. Caleb glanced at her. "For what?" "For tonight. For taking me. For dancing with me. For helping me reclaim that square from bad memories. You would have done it with or without me. You're strong like that." "Maybe, but it was easier with you there." They were almost home when Sarah's sleepy voice came from the back of the wagon. "Papa, when you and Elena get married, can we be in the wedding?" Elena felt her breath catch. Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. "Sarah," he said carefully, "Elena and I we haven't—" "We know," Emma mumbled, half asleep. "But you will. Everyone knows you will. You look at each other the way you and Mama used to look at each other, all soft and happy. That's different, sweetheart. Your mom and I had known each other for years before we married. So? Elena's known us for months now. That's long enough to know we're good people. And we know she's good people. What else matters?" Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought, fighting a smile. What else did matter, really? She'd spent years in a marriage built on illusions and lies. She knew now what really mattered: trust, respect, genuine affection, shared values. And she had all of that here, with this man and these girls. "We'll see," Caleb said diplomatically. "But right now, you two need to focus on sleeping. Tomorrow's Sunday, and you know what that means." "Pancakes," both girls said, perking up briefly before exhaustion dragged them back down. Later, after the girls were truly asleep in their beds and the house was quiet, Elena found Caleb on the porch again. Their spot now, she realized, the place where they'd had their most important conversations. "About what the girls said," she started. "They're children. They don't understand—" "They understand perfectly," Elena interrupted. "They see what's growing between us. And they're not wrong, are they? About us eventually? Eventually, maybe, if that's what you want. But Elena, there's no rush, no timeline. I meant what I said about waiting." Elena sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I know you did, and I appreciate that more than you know. But Caleb, I think I'm closer to ready than I thought I was. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Because what we have here, what we're building, it feels right in a way nothing else in my life has felt right for a very long time." Caleb turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting starlight. "You're sure? Because once we start down this path, once the girls get their hopes up, I'm sure. Not completely healed yet, not perfect, but sure about this. About you. About us. About wanting to build a future here instead of just recovering from the past." Caleb's hand found hers in the darkness. "Then we'll build it. Slowly, carefully, at whatever pace you need, no pressure, no expectations. Just one day at a time, figuring it out together." "One day at a time," Elena echoed. "I can do that." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the night settle over the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. In the barn, a horse nickered softly. The world continued its ancient rhythms, and two people who'd survived more than most began to imagine a future neither had thought possible just months before. Inside the house, Sarah and Emma slept peacefully, dreaming of weddings and forever families and happy endings they were certain were coming. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. 6 months passed like water finding its level, naturally, inevitably, shaping the landscape as it went. Winter came to the mountains with its first snowfall, and Elena stood at the kitchen window watching fat flakes drift down, her hand pressed against the glass. The last time she'd seen snow like this, she'd been half frozen in a trapper's cabin, giving her only blankets to two little girls she didn't know. Now those same girls were building a snowman in the yard, their laughter carrying clear through the cold air. Coffee? Caleb appeared beside her, 2 cups in hand. He'd developed a sixth sense for when she needed grounding, when memories threatened to pull her under. Thank you. Elena accepted the cup, their fingers brushing in the exchange that had become ritual. 6 months of these small touches, these quiet moments of connection. 6 months of healing and growing and learning to trust again. Penny for your thoughts? Caleb asked. I was thinking about the storm, the cabin, how strange life is, how that one night changed everything for all of us, and we didn't even know it. You think you would have helped them if you'd known? If you'd known what it would cost you? Elena considered this, watching Sarah try to lift Emma onto her shoulders to reach the snowman's head. Yes, without question, because the cost wasn't helping them. The cost was everything that came before. Thomas, Garrett, all of it. Helping your daughters was the first choice I'd made in years that was purely my own. That was completely right. Caleb set down his cup and turned to face her fully. Elena, there's something I need to ask you, something I've been working up courage for. Elena's heart began to race, but not with fear, with anticipation. All right? It's been 6 months since Garrett's arrest, since you came to live here. And in that time, you've become, he paused, searching for words. You've become essential to this ranch, to the girls, to me. And I know I said I'd wait, that there was no pressure, but Elena, I need to know. Yes, Elena interrupted softly. Caleb blinked. I haven't asked the question yet. I know, but the answer is yes. Whatever you're about to ask, yes. A slow smile spread across Caleb's face. You don't even know what I was going to say. Don't I? You were going to ask me to marry you, to make this official, to stop being the woman you claimed and become the woman you chose. How did you? Because I've been waiting for you to ask, because I've been ready for weeks now, but I knew you needed time to be sure, to make peace with Margaret's memory, to be certain you weren't just replacing her. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold band worn smooth with age. This was Margaret's ring. I want you to have it, but only if you're comfortable. If you'd rather have something new, something that's just yours. Elena took the box, tears blurring her vision. May I tell you something? About Margaret? Of course. The first week I was here when you and the girls went to town and I stayed behind. I went through this house trying to understand the woman whose space I was occupying. I found her journal in the bedroom, tucked in the drawer of her nightstand. Caleb stiffened. I didn't know she kept a journal. I think that was the point. It was private, just for her. I only read one entry, the last one she wrote. It was 3 days before she died. Elena's voice grew soft. She wrote about you, about the girls, about how worried she was for all of you, and then she wrote something that stayed with me ever since. What did she write? She said, if I could wish for one thing for Caleb after I'm gone, it would be that he finds someone who sees him the way I do, someone who recognizes his goodness, his strength, his capacity for love. Not to replace me, but to honor what we built by continuing to build. Life doesn't stop when we do, and love doesn't diminish by being shared. It multiplies. Caleb's eyes glistened with tears. She really wrote that. She did. And Caleb, I would be honored to wear her ring, not because I'm replacing her, but because I'm continuing what she started, loving you, loving these girls, building a life here. She'd want that. She said so herself. Caleb took the ring from the box with shaking hands and slipped it onto Elena's finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Elena Cross, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, the girl's mother, my partner in all things? Yes, Elena said, her voice breaking with joy. Yes to all of it. They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Outside, the girls' voices suddenly went quiet, and when Caleb and Elena looked out the window, they saw Sarah and Emma pressed against the glass, grinning like they'd just witnessed the greatest event in history. "We saw that," Sarah shouted through the window. "You kissed! Does that mean you're getting married?" Caleb laughed and opened the door. "Come inside before you freeze." The girls tumbled into the kitchen, snow-covered and breathless. "Well," Emma demanded, "are you getting married or not?" Elena held up her hand, showing them the ring. "We're getting married." The shriek that followed probably scared every bird for 3 miles. Sarah and Emma launched themselves at Elena and Caleb, all 4 of them ending up in a tangled, laughing heap on the kitchen floor. "Can we help plan the wedding?" Sarah asked, already mentally cataloging details. "Can I wear a fancy dress?" Emma added. "Can it be soon, like really soon?" Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement. "Yes to all of it," Caleb said, helping Elena to her feet. "But let's give Elena time to breathe first. She just agreed to marry me 5 minutes ago." "We've been waiting for this for months, Papa," Emma said with 9-year-old exasperation. "We've already been planning. We have lists." She produced a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, and sure enough, there were detailed notes about flowers, food, music, and decorations. Sarah had a similar list. Apparently, the girls had been planning this wedding since long before Caleb had worked up the nerve to propose. "You two are impossible," Caleb said fondly. "We're prepared," Sarah corrected. There's a difference." The wedding was planned for early spring, after the snow melted but before the busy ranch season began. Elena wanted simple, just family and close friends, nothing like the elaborate affair her wedding to Thomas had been. That ceremony had been all show, all performance, with none of the substance that made a marriage real. This time would be different. Lucas arrived 2 weeks before the wedding, bringing with him a woman named Catherine, who he introduced as his fiancée. Elena's surprise was complete. Her brother had mentioned in letters that he'd met someone, but she hadn't realized it was serious. "I figured if you can find happiness in the mountains, I can find it in Silver Springs," Lucas said, hugging his sister tight. "Catherine's a teacher, smart, funny, puts up with my journalist hours. We're getting married in the fall." "I'm so happy for you," Elena said, meaning it completely. Her brother had been alone for too long, married to his work, carrying guilt over their failed communication. Now he was free of that, building his own second chance. Catherine proved to be delightful, warm and practical, immediately winning over Sarah and Emma by teaching them a complicated card game that had all 3 of them in stitches within an hour. She and Elena bonded over tea in the kitchen while the men worked outside, sharing stories of difficult pasts and hopeful futures. "Lucas told me everything," Catherine said, "about Thomas, about Garrett, about how you ended up here. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind. It's not a secret. Not anymore. For a while I was ashamed, like being abused was somehow my fault. But I'm not ashamed now. I survived. That's nothing to be ashamed of." "No, it's not. It's something to be proud of." Catherine reached across the table to squeeze Elena's hand. "And I'm glad Lucas helped you. He's been different since then, more purposeful, like he finally found the story that mattered. He saved my life. Him and that young deputy and Caleb. I owe them everything." "You don't owe anyone anything. They did what decent people should do. They helped someone in need. The fact that it's notable says more about the world than it does about them." Elena laughed. "You're going to fit right into this family." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring morning that felt like a gift. Elena dressed in Margaret's room, her room now, truly hers, with Catherine helping with buttons and Sarah and Emma arranging flowers in her hair. The dress was simple ivory cotton, made by a seamstress in town who'd apologized profusely for believing Garrett's lies and insisted on making the dress for free as penance. Elena had paid her anyway. Forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing had happened, but she appreciated the gesture. "You look beautiful," Sarah breathed when Elena was ready. "Like a princess," Emma added, "a brave princess who saves people." "I think you two have that backwards," Elena said, kneeling to their level. "You're the ones who saved me, you and your father. I hope you know that." "We saved each other," Sarah said wisely. "That's what families do." The ceremony took place in the meadow behind the house. The same meadow where Sarah and Emma had first shown Elena the ranch, where they'd picked wildflowers and chased butterflies and slowly become a family. Chairs had been set up for guests, maybe 40 people in all, neighbors and friends who'd proven themselves loyal during the difficult months. Doc Morrison was there with his mother Clara. Michael Chen had traveled from Carson City with his father. Their relationship mended now that Michael had proven his courage. Mrs. Henderson brought half the boarding house residents. Even Mayor Jenkins attended, looking properly humble. But the most important people were right up front. Lucas standing as best man, Catherine holding Elena's bouquet, and Sarah and Emma in matching dresses of pale blue, holding hands and grinning so wide it looked like their faces might split. Caleb waited at the makeshift altar, really just an arch the girls had decorated with ribbon and flowers, looking nervous and handsome in his Sunday best. When Elena walked toward him down the grass aisle, his expression transformed into something she'd treasure forever, pure, unfiltered joy. The ceremony was brief, officiated by a circuit preacher who'd known Margaret and approved wholeheartedly of Caleb's choice to marry again. The vows were traditional, but when Elena spoke them, promising to love and honor and cherish, she meant every word with an intensity that still surprised her. After Thomas, she hadn't thought she'd ever want to marry again. But this wasn't marriage as prison or performance. This was partnership freely chosen. When the preacher pronounced them married and Caleb kissed her, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers. But Elena barely heard them. She was too focused on the feeling of Caleb's arms around her, the sound of his whispered, "I love you," the sight of Sarah and Emma rushing forward to hug them both. "We're officially a family now," Sarah announced to anyone listening, "all legal and everything." "We were always a family," Emma corrected. "Now we just have paperwork." The celebration that followed was exactly what Elena had wanted. Simple food, good company, laughter and music and joy. Lucas gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about second chances and the courage it takes to hope again. Catherine sang a song that had people swaying in their seats. The girls performed a carefully rehearsed poem about families being made by choice, not blood. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Caleb swept Elena into a dance. Other couples joined them, Lucas and Catherine, Doc Morrison and Clara, even the girls dancing together, stepping on each other's feet and giggling. "Happy?" Caleb asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again," Elena admitted. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real, that I'm here, married to you, mother to those incredible girls, that I survived everything that came before to get to this moment. You did more than survive. You transformed, took everything Garrett and Thomas tried to break in you and made it stronger. I had help. I had you. We had each other. That's the difference." Caleb pulled her closer as the music slowed. "Elena Ward, I promise you, for the rest of my life, you'll never have to face anything alone again. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Elena echoed, resting her head against his shoulder. I like the sound of that. The party lasted until stars filled the sky. Gradually, guests began to leave, offering congratulations and well wishes. Lucas and Catherine departed for town, promising to visit again soon. The girls finally admitted exhaustion and were carried upstairs by Caleb, still wearing their fancy dresses and flower crowns. Elena stood in the now quiet meadow, surrounded by the remnants of celebration, and felt peace settle over her like a benediction. This place, these people, they were hers now. She belonged here in a way she'd never belonged anywhere before. "Elena?" Caleb's voice came from the house. "You coming in?" "In a minute," she called back. "I'm just taking it all in." But when he appeared beside her a moment later, she wasn't surprised. Of course he'd come to her. That's what they did now, found each other, stood together, faced the world as a team. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. The storm, the cabin, the town square. How many times I could have died or given up but didn't. How all of it, all the pain and fear and struggle, led me here to you, to this life. You think it was worth it? All of it?" Elena considered the question seriously. "I think some things shouldn't have happened. Thomas shouldn't have hurt me. Garrett shouldn't have terrorized this town. People shouldn't have stood by and watched injustice happen. But do I think surviving it was worth it to end up here? Yes." without question. Because this, she gestured at the house, where warm light spilled from windows and she could hear Sarah and Emma's voices as Caleb tucked them in. This is everything I never knew I needed. They stood together watching the house, their home, where two little girls who'd recognized her from one act of kindness now slept peacefully under the same roof. Where a man who'd taken an impossible chance now stood beside her as husband and partner. Where a woman who'd been condemned to die now lived fully, freely, without fear. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranch life was hard. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and broken equipment, days when money was tight and worry ran high. Elena had nightmares sometimes, waking in a panic before Caleb's steady presence reminded her she was safe. News came occasionally of Garrett in prison, and each time Elena had to wrestle with old fears before remembering he couldn't hurt her anymore. But the challenges were manageable because they faced them together. When drought threatened their cattle, neighbors who'd once condemned Elena now helped dig wells and share resources. When Sarah broke her arm falling from the oak tree, the whole community rallied around them. When Emma struggled with reading, Elena spent hours patiently teaching her, drawing on reserves of patience she'd discovered she possessed. Sarah and Emma grew into remarkable young women, raised by three parents, Caleb, Elena, and Margaret's enduring influence. They were brave and kind and fiercely loyal, quick to defend the underdog and slow to judge. They knew their mother through stories and journals and the piano she'd played. They knew Elena through daily life and love and the mother she'd become. They understood that having two mothers didn't diminish either. It enriched them both. On Sarah and Emma's 13th birthday, Elena gave them each a gift, a locket containing a small portrait. On one side was Margaret's picture, on the other was Elena's. "So you always carry both of us with you," Elena explained, "because you're a product of both our love. Margaret gave you life in your first years. I've had the privilege of the years since. Together, we made you who you are." The girls cried. Hormonal teenagers discovering their emotions ran deeper than they'd realized, and hugged Elena so tight she could barely breathe. These children who'd chosen her in a town square when she was at her lowest, who'd seen past blood and bruises to the woman underneath, who'd given her a reason to survive. Lucas and Catherine visited regularly, eventually bringing children of their own, cousins for Sarah and Emma, who filled the house with noise and chaos and joy. Family gatherings became tradition, everyone crowding around the extended table Caleb had built, sharing food and stories and laughter. The town of Redemption Creek slowly transformed under new leadership. A new sheriff was elected, Doc Morrison's son, who'd studied law and came back determined to do right by his community. Town meetings became actual democratic processes rather than Garrett's show trials. Women got the vote in local elections. The wooden posts in the square were torn down and replaced with a memorial, a simple stone that read, "May we never forget what happens when fear governs instead of justice." Elena attended the memorial's dedication, standing between Caleb and her daughters, and felt the last weight of shame lift from her shoulders. She was no longer the woman who'd been displayed and condemned. She was Elena Ward, rancher's wife, mother, survivor, community member. The past was part of her story, but it didn't define her anymore. On their 5th anniversary, Caleb surprised Elena with a trip to the old trapper's cabin where they'd first met, or rather where Elena had first saved his daughters. He'd spent weeks finding it, tracking down property records and old maps, determined to locate the place that had changed all their lives. The cabin was still there, weathered but standing, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. Elena stepped inside and felt time collapse. She could almost see herself as she'd been that night, half frozen and desperate, hearing the door crash open and seeing a terrified father carrying 2 small children. "I wanted you to see it again," Caleb said softly. "To remember that even at your lowest point, you were capable of extraordinary kindness. That the woman you are now was always there, just waiting for a chance to emerge." Elena walked through the small space, touching walls she'd leaned against, seeing the fireplace where she'd kept inadequate flames burning. "I gave them my blankets because I couldn't bear the thought of children freezing. It wasn't heroic. It was just human." Exactly. That's what makes it matter. You had every reason to be selfish, to protect what little you had. But you didn't. You chose compassion, and Sarah and Emma never forgot that. When they saw you in that square, They recognized someone who'd made that choice once and would make it again. They recognized family. Tears streamed down Elena's face. I never thought that night mattered. I thought I was just doing what anyone would do. But not anyone did. You did. And it saved all of us, not just the girls, but me too. I was drowning in grief and fear, trying to hold everything together alone. Then you came into our lives, and suddenly I wasn't alone anymore. Suddenly there was hope again, and possibility, and love. They held each other in that cabin while sunlight streamed through gaps in the walls, standing where their story had really begun. Then they rode home together to the ranch, where their daughters waited, where dinner would be ready and the evening chores would need doing, and life would continue its beautiful, ordinary rhythm. Years passed. Sarah married a young teacher from Carson City and moved to the capital, though she visited often, bringing grandchildren who climbed the same oak tree she'd climbed. Emma took over the ranch operations, having inherited both Caleb's skill with livestock and Elena's head for business. She married later to a veterinarian who'd come west from Boston and fallen in love with both the land and the fierce young woman who ran it. Caleb's hair turned silver, then white. Elena's did the same, though she maintained the strength that had carried her through trials that would have broken lesser people. They grew old together on the ranch, watching seasons turn and grandchildren grow, building a legacy that had nothing to do with wealth or fame and everything to do with love and courage and choosing each other every single day. On quiet evenings, they still sat on the porch together, watching stars emerge and remembering. They remembered a town square where injustice had nearly prevailed. They remembered a daughter's whispered words, "Papa, that's her." They remembered choosing each other when logic said they shouldn't, when fear said to walk away, when every rational argument pointed toward separation. But they'd chosen love instead, chosen family, chosen to build something beautiful from broken pieces. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. Elena lived to be 83, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, dying peacefully in the same bed where she'd once hidden, terrified and alone. Her last words were to Caleb, who'd never left her side through 60 years of marriage. Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me back to life. Caleb followed her 3 years later, his own last words a promise to Margaret and Elena both. I loved you well, both of you, and I'll carry that love wherever I'm going next. They were buried together in the family plot on the hill overlooking the ranch, beside Margaret, who they both honored, under the vast Montana sky. The headstone read simply, Caleb and Elena Ward. They chose each other, they chose love, they chose right. And in Redemption Creek, where a wooden post had once stood as a symbol of injustice, children grew up hearing the story of a woman who'd survived hell, a man who'd risked everything, and 2 little girls who'd recognized family when they saw it. The story became legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that courage comes in many forms, that justice is worth fighting for, and that the families we choose are every bit as real as the families we're born into. Sarah and Emma told their children, who told their children, who told theirs. Remember the woman at the post? Remember the man who stepped forward. Remember that one choice, one moment of courage can change everything. That standing up when everyone else stays silent is how evil is defeated. That love, real, chosen, fought for love, is the most powerful force in the world. And in a world that often felt dark, that story became light. A reminder that even at our lowest point, even when all seems lost, there's always the possibility of redemption, always the chance for second chances, always hope. Because somewhere in the mountains of Montana, a rancher once chose a condemned woman, and 2 little girls recognized their mother before anyone else could see her, and together they built something that lasted generations. They built family, they built justice, they built love, and in the end, that's the only story that really matters.